Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a story that might make you think twice the next time you glance into a mirror. It's the kind of tale that crawls beneath your skin, slowly whispering in your ear long after the lights go out. Imagine this. You're alone in your room. Everything is quiet, save for the soft ticking of a clock on the wall. You catch your reflection in the mirror, but something's off. Maybe it's the way your eyes linger just a second too long, or perhaps the subtle shift in the angle of your own head. Something's just different. You probably won't survive this kind of realization. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first time it happened, Laura didn't think much of it. She had been getting ready for bed, brushing her hair in front of the bathroom mirror, when something unusual caught her eye. The reflection staring back at her wasn't quite the same. She could swear her own expression had changed, a shift, a subtle twitch of the mouth. But when she glanced at herself again, nothing was out of place. Her face was exactly as she had expected, tired, pensive, weary from the day. She dismissed the thought, finished her routine, and went to sleep. But as the days wore on, the feeling began to return. It was a Friday evening when it happened again. Laura had just finished her evening shower, steam swirling around the bathroom in thick layers. The mirror fogged over quickly, but she could still make out her figure in the haze. Her hand reached for the towel, and as she dabbed at the mirror, she saw it just for a split second. Her reflection wasn't matching her movements. At first, she thought it was just the fog, the mist of the bathroom distorting the glass. But as she wiped away more of the steam, the reflection slowly became clearer, and yet, it wasn't her. The figure in the mirror wasn't doing what she was doing. She paused, and so did her reflection. She smiled just a little then. A moment later, the reflection smiled back, but the smile was wrong. It stretched too wide, the eyes too dark, too intense, as if something was trying to claw its way through. But when she blinked, the reflection was normal again. She didn't mention it to anyone, not at first. After all, who would believe her? But she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that she had just witnessed something strange. Something that wasn't quite her own reflection, and yet it was. Was it just exhaustion? A trick of the light? Or was there something else at play? Days passed without any further incidents, but the mirror became an unwelcome presence. Each time Laura passed by it, she couldn't help but glance. Every time she caught her reflection, a deep unease would settle in her chest, a gnawing feeling at the back of her mind, telling her that it was more than just her imagination. Then one night, while brushing her teeth, the most disturbing thing happened. Her reflection spoke. It was barely a whisper, so faint that Laura wasn't sure she had heard it at all. She leaned in closer, staring intently at her reflection. She was certain it came from the mirror, a voice so soft and ethereal that it barely seemed real. She froze. The reflection of herself in the mirror was no longer smiling, no longer the calm, neutral version of her face. It was as though the reflection was trying to communicate something, its lips moving slightly. But there was no sound. Laura's heart raced. She was about to turn away, but her own reflection didn't. Instead, it lingered, staring at her with hollow eyes, as if waiting for something, waiting for her to react. The intensity in its gaze was overwhelming, and Laura found herself unable to move, unable to look away. It felt like something was pulling at her, like the reflection wanted her to understand something, or worse, wanted something from her. She blinked. The reflection returned to normal. It was her face again, calm, quiet, just as it should be. Her hands trembled as she finished brushing her teeth, but when she looked up again, the reflection was still there, just as still as before. She quickly turned away, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin. This had to be a bad dream, she thought. She must be imagining things. After all, mirrors didn't have minds of their own right. That night, Laura tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the reflection, her own face staring back at her in the dark. It was as though the mirror had imprinted itself onto her mind, lingering just beneath the surface of her thoughts. The next morning, she decided to leave the house. A walk would help clear her head. But even as she stood in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom, ready to put on a coat, she couldn't stop herself from looking. Her reflection stood there just like her, but this time it was different. It felt wrong. Her reflection was watching her in a way it had never done before. It wasn't simply mimicking her movements. It was anticipating them, as if it knew exactly what she was going to do next. She backed away from the mirror, her breath coming in short, quick bursts. She couldn't explain it. It felt like something was trapped inside the glass, pressing against the surface, yearning to get out. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, just a trick of the mind, a weird glitch in her perception. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized something chilling, whatever was happening, was not in her mind. Whatever was happening in the mirror. And it wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was something else, something that didn't belong, and it wanted to make its way out. The days following that moment were a blur for Laura. Her usual routine became a series of cautious steps around the mirror. She couldn't bear to look at it for too long, afraid that she might see something else, something even darker than before. Every time she glanced at her reflection, a strange sensation crawled up her spine, as though her own face had become a foreign mask, one that wasn't entirely hers. She tried to tell herself that it was all in her head, that it was simply a result of stress, maybe even a little sleep deprivation. After all, she had been working long hours, and her mind had been playing tricks on her before. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just stress. Something was wrong. One evening, she sat down at the kitchen table, trying to focus on a book. The silence in the house was oppressive. The ticking of the clock was the only sound, each second stretching longer than the last. She could feel the pull. She tried to ignore it, but the mirror in the hallway just around the corner from the kitchen seemed to beckon her. She couldn't help herself. She had to look. It was almost as if the reflection was calling to her, whispering without words, urging her to step closer. She stood up, her legs stiff, and slowly walked toward the mirror. The hallway was dimly lit, the shadows gathering in the corners, making the space feel narrower than usual. The mirror stood at the end, framed in dark wood, its surface reflecting the dim light of the hallway. Laura approached it cautiously, as if moving closer to the edge of a cliff. Her heart thudded in her chest, and each step felt like a mistake. When she finally reached the mirror, she couldn't look at herself directly. She couldn't bring herself to face what might be there waiting. Instead, she let her eyes flicker across the glass, focusing on the small details, the way the light played across the surface, the slight imperfections in the frame, the way the reflection seemed to bend the space around it. But then, something shifted. Her reflection wasn't standing still. She froze. Her heart skipped a beat. The reflection, her own, was moving without her. Slowly, ever so slowly, it turned its head, its eyes following Laura's every move, the expression changing into something darker, something sinister. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she realized the reflection was not imitating her. It was no longer following her lead. It was controlling the movement now. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't possible. She hadn't moved. She hadn't made a single gesture. Yet the reflection in the mirror, Her own reflection was now watching her with a cruel, unsettling grin. The smile wasn't right. It was too wide, too forced, stretching at the edges like something that had been pushed beyond its limits. It was a smile that had no place on her face. Laura stumbled backward, the back of her knees hitting the table. Her hands gripped the edge, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the glass. The reflection in the mirror was no longer hers. It had a life of its own, one that seemed far more aware of the world around it than she was. The reflection blinked. Not like a normal blink, but slowly, deliberately, as if it was savoring the moment. And then it smiled again, wider this time, its teeth sharp and uneven. "Get away from me," Laura whispered, her voice trembling. Her reflection did not speak. It didn't need to. It only tilted its head, its eyes never leaving hers, its grin widening even further. Laura felt the cold sweat trickle down her back. She had to leave. She had to get out of the house. But she couldn't move. Her feet were frozen to the spot. The reflection's gaze was so intense, so heavy, that it felt like it was anchoring her in place. She took a shaky step back, her eyes still locked on the mirror. And then, with a sudden jerking motion, her reflection lifted its hand just as she did. But it wasn't quite in sync. It moved too fast, its fingers stretching unnaturally, almost as if they were reaching for her. The fingers pressed against the glass, tapping lightly, before they pressed harder, forcing their way through. The surface of the mirror rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. Laura gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. The reflection's hand moved again, as if it was trying to break through the glass. The mirror, her reflection, was no longer just a reflection. It was reaching for her. The air in the hallway grew heavy, pressing in from all sides. The coldness of it sent shivers down Laura's spine. The world around her felt wrong, too quiet, too still. She tried to turn away to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as if the reflection had some sort of power over her, paralyzing her with its presence. With every passing second, the mirror seemed to grow darker. The reflection within it, more menacing, more real. Laura could feel the chill of the glass now, as though the mirror itself had become a doorway, a portal to something far more sinister than she could ever have imagined. Suddenly, the hand in the reflection slammed against the glass, sending a shock through Laura's body. She cried out, her breath shallow and quick as the glass cracked. The reflection didn't stop. It only pushed harder, its fingers bending unnaturally as they scraped across the surface. And with each movement, the cracks in the mirror deepened, spreading like veins, until finally, with a sharp, bone-chilling sound, the mirror shattered. The crash of the mirror shattering echoed through the hallway like the final note of a haunting symphony. Laura stumbled backward, her breath coming in ragged gasps as shards of glass rained down to the floor around her. The sound was deafening, but it didn't mask the deeper, more unsettling noise that followed, a soft scraping like something dragging across the ground. She blinked, trying to process what had just happened. Her reflection, the thing that had been watching her, had vanished with the mirror. For a moment, it felt like everything was still. The shattered glass sparkled on the floor, its jagged edges catching the dim light. But that peaceful silence was short-lived. The scraping sound grew louder. Laura's eyes darted to the pieces of the mirror scattered across the floor, her mind racing. Could it have been her imagination? Could she have just imagined everything? No, it couldn't have been. She had seen it, the reflection, the hand reaching out. It was real. She was certain of it. Then slowly, something began to emerge from the shattered glass. It wasn't an object. It wasn't a piece of the mirror. It was a figure, dark and formless at first, but as it began to take shape, it became clearer. The figure was tall, its edges flickering in and out of focus, like a broken image struggling to hold itself together. And yet, despite the fractured appearance, there was something undeniably human about it. Laura's heart skipped a beat as she watched the figure rise, the remnants of the mirror clinging to it like a veil of broken glass. It moved slowly at first, then faster with a sense of purpose, as though it was searching for something or someone. The scraping sound, the sound that had once been soft, now rang out sharply with each movement of the figure. It reached out one long, thin arm, extending toward Laura, the fingers ending in jagged, glass-like nails, the same nails she had seen in the reflection moments before. Fear gripped her chest, paralyzing her. Her body was frozen, her legs unwilling to carry her away. She wanted to run to escape, but the air around her had thickened, pressing in on her, making every movement feel impossible. Her eyes remained locked on the figure as it came closer, its twisted form crawling toward her, leaving a trail of broken glass in its wake. And then it spoke. Not with words, not with a voice, but with a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound that echoed in her mind, reverberating in the silence of the house. "You can't escape me." The words were chilling, laced with a malevolence that made Laura's blood run cold. Her mouth went dry and her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but the words wouldn't come. It was as if her very voice had been stolen, trapped inside her throat. The figure continued to advance, its dark form becoming more defined, the pieces of the broken mirror now twisting together to form an outline that seemed to mock her every movement. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It wasn't just an image in the glass. It was something real, something alive, something that wanted her. As it closed the distance between them, Laura's mind raced. She had to think. She had to do something. But what? What could she possibly do against this? The figure wasn't bound by the laws of reality. It was a shadow, a nightmare, something that didn't belong to the world she knew. The figure stopped just a few feet away from her, its head tilting slightly as if studying her. Its face was an empty void, no eyes, no mouth, just a dark, featureless mask where a face should have been. But Laura could feel its gaze penetrating her, reaching deep into her soul. She could feel it watching her, waiting for something. The air in the hallway grew colder, colder than it had ever been before. Laura's breath came out in visible clouds, the temperature dropping so suddenly that her teeth began to chatter. Her skin prickled with goosebumps, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The figure raised its hand again, the jagged glass scraping together like the sound of nails on a chalkboard. Laura flinched, stepping back, but the figure didn't advance. Instead, it stood perfectly still, its hand hovering in the air. Suddenly, the mirror fragments on the ground began to shift. They trembled and slid toward the figure as if drawn to it by some invisible force. The shards of glass hovered in midair, spinning and rearranging themselves in a pattern, forming something familiar. Laura's stomach twisted in horror as the glass pieces began to take shape, aligning themselves together like a puzzle, forming a distorted reflection of herself. But this reflection wasn't quite right. Her own face in the glass seemed twisted, its features contorted in an unnatural way. The eyes were too wide, the mouth too stretched, and the expression was pure malice. The reflection in the mirror snarled at her, its lips curling in a grin that wasn't hers. Laura could feel a scream rising in her throat, but no sound escaped her lips. She was trapped between the real world and this nightmare, unable to escape the gaze of the thing that had once been her reflection. "Do you see?" the figure whispered again, its voice, now coming from within her own mind, echoing in the quiet space between them. "This is what you've become. This is what you were always meant to be." The words sliced through her like a blade, and for the first time, Laura understood. The reflection wasn't trying to break free. It wasn't trying to escape the mirror. It was trying to pull her in. It was trying to consume her, to drag her into the glass where it would become her, and she would become it. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the figure's smile widened. "It's your turn now," it whispered. And then the world went black. The darkness was absolute. It wasn't like closing your eyes and falling into sleep where the world fades into a soft, comforting oblivion. No, this was different. This was a void, utterly devoid of sound, light, or form. Laura felt her body suspended in a strange, weightless place. She couldn't see. Her hands couldn't feel the floor beneath her feet, couldn't hear the pounding of her heart, or the ragged breaths that had escaped her mouth only moments before. She had no sense of time, no sense of space. It felt like she was floating in a universe that didn't quite exist, held in place by something both cold and oppressive. A part of her wanted to scream, to claw her way out of this suffocating darkness, but the sensation of paralysis was overwhelming. Her limbs refused to move, as if some invisible force was pressing her down, locking her in place. Then something shifted. A distant sound, a faint crackling, like the sound of dry leaves rustling in the wind. The noise was subtle at first, but as it grew louder, it became clear. It was the sound of glass breaking, of mirrors shattering. Laura felt a chill run down her spine as the memories of what had happened before returned, vivid and sharp. The figure, the broken mirror, the reflection reaching out toward her. She tried to scream again, but the sound wouldn't come. She was trapped in this void, cut off from the world she knew. There was no escape, no way out. But then, in the distance, a faint glow appeared. It was small at first, a barely perceptible flicker, like the dying embers of a forgotten fire. The light pulsed, growing brighter, and with it came a sense of warmth. For the first time since she'd been swallowed by the darkness, she felt a sense of hope. Without thinking, she moved toward the light. It wasn't her body that moved, not in the traditional sense. It was as if she was being pulled toward it, drawn by some unseen force. The further she went, the stronger the pull became, like a magnetic current guiding her through the blackness. The light grew brighter still, until it was all around her, filling the void with a soft golden hue. And then suddenly, the light erupted in a burst of clarity, and Laura found herself standing in a room. It was familiar, yet it wasn't. The room was small, dimly lit by a single lamp hanging from the ceiling. It looked like her bedroom, but there was something off about it. The furniture was wrong. The walls were too bare, too empty. The curtains were drawn tightly, and the air was thick with dust. A stale, suffocating scent filled the room, as though it had been abandoned for years. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't her room. It couldn't be. And yet when she looked down at the floor, she saw it there in the corner of the room, just beside the bed, a full-length mirror. The reflection staring back at her was not her own. It was different, distorted, twisted. The face staring back at her was pale and gaunt, its eyes wide and hollow, its lips stretched in an eerie smile. Laura took a step back, panic flooding her chest. The figure in the mirror was the same one that had emerged from the shattered glass. It was the same thing that had been chasing her, the thing that had stolen her reflection. But now it was in the mirror. It was trapped there, wasn't it? She reached out her hand, trembling as it neared the cold surface of the glass. The reflection's eyes seemed to follow her every movement, its gaze locked onto her hand, a smile tugging at the corners of its mouth. The air around the mirror grew heavier, colder, until she could see her own breath clouding in the space between them. Suddenly, the figure in the mirror reached out its hand, stretching through the glass, as if the barrier between them no longer existed. Laura recoiled, but her feet were frozen to the floor. The mirror seemed to warp, and distort the surface, rippling like water. The figure's hand passed through the glass without hesitation, and its fingers brushed the edge of Laura's own. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of cold shot through her body, a freezing sensation that made her entire body seize. She gasped, unable to move, as the figure's smile grew wider, its features becoming sharper, more menacing. And then, in an instant, the figure pulled her forward. She was yanked toward the mirror with such force that her vision blurred. She tried to scream, but the sound was caught in her throat, swallowed by the overwhelming pressure that seemed to squeeze the air from her lungs. Her body was pulled into the mirror, her vision flickering as the world around her twisted and bent. The coldness enveloped her, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. It was as though she were being dragged into a place that was neither here nor there, a space between dimensions, a limbo where reflections didn't follow the rules of reality. With a final violent tug, the mirror swallowed her whole, and then silence. For a long moment, Laura felt nothing. The world was still, and she was lost in the dark void again. But this time, it wasn't the same empty darkness she had experienced before. This darkness was thick with anticipation, with something waiting for her to understand, to accept it. She opened her eyes, or thought she did, and saw herself standing before her, but it wasn't quite her. Not exactly. It was the reflection, the one that had been following her, the one that had come alive in the mirror. But this time, it wasn't trapped. It wasn't contained. It was real. And it was waiting for her. "You're finally here." The figure whispered, its voice like shards of glass scraping against bone. "Welcome to my world." Laura tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. She was trapped here in this twisted version of reality, surrounded by mirrors, thousands of them, all reflecting her, all showing her the same dark, distorted version of herself. She wasn't alone. She never would be again. The reflection stepped closer, its dark eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. It raised a hand, its fingers stretched toward her, and Laura knew deep down that there was no escaping this place. No way back. It had all been leading to this. Laura couldn't breathe. The air in this mirror world was thick and oppressive, as if the very atmosphere conspired to smother her. She stood there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to escape the relentless grip of the reflection that now towered before her. It knew she was everything that Laura feared. The twisted version of herself standing in the place where her own self had once been. Its grin stretching impossibly wide, its eyes gleaming with something darker than malice. "You shouldn't have come here." The reflection said, its voice distorted, echoing through the thousands of mirrors surrounding them. The words crawled into Laura's mind, like insects burrowing deeper and deeper with each repetition. "This is my world now." Laura's throat tightened. Her mind raced. She was standing in a room full of mirrors, each one reflecting a distorted version of herself. Some were warped with grotesque features, others with monstrous eyes or unsettling smiles, but all of them, each and every one, was her. But not her. They were things made of her face, her body, but twisted, broken, and empty. The reflection's hand rose, a single finger pointing directly at her. "You see, don't you? You and I are the same. We always were. But you were afraid to face the truth." Laura shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, this isn't real. This can't be real." Her voice faltered, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the reflection, her own reflection staring back at her with cruel intent. The reflection took a step forward, the mirrored surface beneath its feet, rippling as if it were no longer bound by the laws of physics. Each step it took created a faint sound, like glass grinding against glass. You never understood, the reflection murmured, taking another slow, deliberate step. You've always been running, hiding from the truth, hiding from me. Laura felt something deep inside her crack, hiding from it. She had never run. She had never hidden. She had simply lived her life. Or at least she thought she had. But now, in the face of the distorted figure that stood before her, that was her, she couldn't help but feel the weight of something larger, something she couldn't fully comprehend, but which had been following her all along. You've always known, deep down. The reflection continued its voice, lowering to a whisper that made Laura's skin crawl. We are the same. I was the one trapped in the glass, but now I'm free. And you're the one who's going to stay here. The darkness of the room seemed to pulse with the reflection's words, as if the very space between the mirrors was alive, waiting for Laura to accept its cold embrace. Her pulse hammered in her chest as the figure grew closer, its eyes never leaving hers. It reached out slowly, deliberately, and Laura's heart stopped. The reflection's hand touched her shoulder. A jolt of cold spread through her body, more intense than anything she had ever felt before. It wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional. It felt like the very essence of her being was being stripped away, replaced by something darker, something wrong. The figure's grin widened and Laura felt herself falling. Not physically, she wasn't moving, but it was as if the ground had slipped away from under her. She reached out, desperately trying to steady herself, but the mirrors around her began to warp and twist, creating a dizzying kaleidoscope of her own image. She stumbled, her legs weak, and the reflection stepped closer, wrapping its icy fingers around her wrist. No more running, it whispered. This is where we belong. Together. Laura's vision blurred as she felt herself sinking, falling deeper into the distorted world she had been pulled into. She struggled against it, her mind fighting to stay above the suffocating darkness that was closing in. Suddenly, a sharp, terrifying thought cut through her panic. This wasn't just about the reflection. It wasn't about the figure that looked like her or the shattered glass. It was about something deeper, something more profound. It was about who she was, who she had been running from, and who she was about to become. She looked up, her gaze locking with the reflections one final time. And that was when she realized it wasn't just a reflection. It was her own fear, her own self-doubt, her own unacknowledged darkness. The reflection had come to life not because of some supernatural force, but because she had allowed it to. She had pushed it away, hidden from it, and now it was here to claim what was its own. No, Laura gasped, struggling to break free. I won't let you. You have no choice, the reflection replied, its voice filled with satisfaction. You are me, and I am you. The moment it said those words, Laura felt herself sink into the mirror, into the very fabric of the darkness that now surrounded her. The room, the mirrors, the reflection, everything melted away as she was drawn deeper and deeper into the void. She reached out one last time, but there was no escape. The pull was too strong. As her consciousness slipped into the nothingness, she heard the reflection's final words echo in her mind. We'll be together forever now. And with that, the mirrors shattered. Everything went silent. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Laura could no longer tell where she was. There was no sound, no light, no tangible reality. She wasn't floating yet. She wasn't standing. She had no weight, no sense of her own body. It was as though she had become one with the darkness, a piece of it that stretched infinitely part of something far too vast to comprehend. But then a soft whisper broke the stillness. It wasn't the reflection's voice, not quite. It was a voice that seemed to come from within her, yet also from outside of her. The kind of voice that clung to the edges of her mind like a half-remembered dream, slipping between the folds of consciousness. "You cannot run from me any longer," the voice murmured. It was deep, resonant, as though it carried the weight of ages, a familiar tone that sent a shiver of recognition down her spine. It was her voice, her own voice. No, she thought, her mind struggling to form coherent thoughts. "I'm not her. I'm not the reflection. I'm not like that." But even as she thought it, the darkness around her seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive. She could feel something stirring beneath the surface, something that was becoming aware of her thoughts, her fears. It was impossible to escape. And that realization hit her harder than the reflection ever had. She wasn't just trapped in the mirror world anymore. She was trapped inside herself, inside her own psyche, her own fears and desires. As the voice continued to echo, Laura found herself sinking deeper, not physically, but emotionally. It was like she was being pulled into a deeper part of her mind, the part she had locked away for years. The reflection had been a physical manifestation of her darkest self. But now it was something worse, something more dangerous. The reflection had never been a separate entity. It had always been a part of her, a reflection of her inner turmoil, her hidden fears. And now it had found a way to claw its way out. "I am you," the voice repeated louder this time. "The truth is, I always was. You've always known it deep down." "No, this isn't real," she thought desperately, her thoughts fragmented. "This can't be real. It's just a nightmare." But the deeper she sank into this mind-warped space, the more she realized that the nightmare was real, at least in the sense that it was born from something within her. It wasn't an external force. It wasn't some malevolent spirit or vengeful entity. It was her, the version of herself that she had tried to bury, the one she had refused to acknowledge. Memories began to surface, dark and jagged. Her childhood, her quiet fears, the moments where she had been ashamed of herself, where she had hidden her true thoughts from others. All those feelings of inadequacy, of self-loathing, they hadn't disappeared. They had only been buried deep inside, and now they were rising to the surface. She saw images from her past flicker in the darkness. Times when she had failed, when she had been afraid to speak up, when she had felt invisible, rejected. Her mind latched onto these memories like a drowning person, grasping at straws, each one dragging her deeper into the abyss. Suddenly, she felt herself physically pulled, as if the very darkness surrounding her had a grip on her soul. Her vision wavered and shifted. She couldn't tell if she was still trapped within the darkness or if she was back in her own room. Everything was distorted, a collage of shifting shapes, half-formed figures. Then out of the haze, a figure emerged. It was her, or at least it looked like her. The reflection. No, it wasn't just the reflection anymore. It was her. The way she had always felt inside the voice that had whispered doubts into her ears, the part of her that couldn't let go of all the things she wished she hadn't done, the words she hadn't spoken. It was a physical manifestation of everything she had tried to keep hidden. She stood in front of herself, the reflection, her twisted, dark self, smiling, that cruel, knowing smile. The smile of someone who had already won, someone who had already seen the inevitable truth. Laura's body shook as she looked at the figure. How could she face herself like this? How could she confront the things she had buried so deeply? "I've waited a long time for you to come around." The reflection said, its voice dripping with malicious sweetness. "You think you can run from me forever. You think you can ignore me and move on with your life. No, I've been here all along, hiding inside you, feeding off your fears. The figure's eyes gleamed with cold amusement, and it stepped closer to Laura, its body now flickering and warping like a mirage in the desert. Every step it took echoed in Laura's ears, making the air vibrate with a sound that was both familiar and deeply unsettling. "I am everything you've ever feared," the reflection whispered. "The parts of you that you've locked away, the pieces of your soul that you thought you could hide. I know your secrets, your regrets, your shame. You can't escape me. You are me." With those final words, the reflection lunged forward, its hands reaching for Laura. But this time, Laura didn't recoil. She didn't pull back in fear. Instead, she stared at the reflection, at the version of herself that had tormented her, and a strange calm washed over her. For the first time, she realized the truth. This wasn't some separate entity. It wasn't something trying to destroy her. It was a part of her, and maybe, just maybe, if she could accept that part of herself, if she could face the darkness and stop running from it, she might be able to stop the reflection's hold over her. She might be able to regain control. But that would mean accepting everything she had rejected, the pain, the shame, the fear. It would mean acknowledging the parts of herself she had buried for so long. The reflection's fingers closed around her wrist, icy cold. Its eyes bored into hers, but this time Laura didn't look away. "I won't let you control me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment, the reflection faltered its expression, shifting just for a second. And then with a sudden jolt, it let go. The darkness surrounding Laura began to shift again. This time, it wasn't pulling her in. It was loosening its grip. The feeling of suffocation began to lift, and a faint light appeared in the distance. The reflection, once so powerful, now seemed to waver, to tremble. "You're nothing," Laura said louder this time. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The reflection's face twisted in rage, but before it could react, the light surrounding Laura grew stronger until it enveloped her completely. With a final blinding flash, everything went dark. The darkness remained, but it no longer felt like a weight on her chest. Instead of suffocating her, it seemed to be withdrawing, receding, like the tide after a storm. Laura floated, suspended in the quiet, empty space. The oppressive pressure that had once filled the air now seemed distant, fading slowly like an echo from far away. At first, she didn't know what to make of it. The void around her was no longer cold and unyielding. It felt neutral, no longer hostile, but neither was it welcoming. It was as if she had crossed through a threshold into a place where she had never been before. A place beyond the reach of the reflection, beyond the mind games that had tormented her. She tried to move, to take a step, but there was nothing solid to push against. There was no ground, no walls, no floor beneath her feet. She was weightless, floating through an endless expanse of shifting shadows. Yet she didn't feel afraid. The fear that had clung to her like a shadow for so long was gone, but there was something else. A sense of loss, a quiet emptiness. She hadn't expected that. She had fought so hard to escape the reflection, to escape herself in a way. And yet, now that the darkness was gone, now that she felt lighter, freer than she ever had, there was a strange hollowness that settled in the pit of her stomach. What had she lost in the process? Suddenly, a flicker of light appeared in the distance. It was small at first, like a star twinkling in the distance, but it grew brighter as she focused on it. Something within her stirred. She felt a pull toward it, a sense of curiosity, mixed with a faint lingering dread. What would happen if she followed it? What would she find? The light grew, becoming a radiant beam that illuminated the darkness around her. As she moved closer, the void seemed to change. The shadows began to recede, replaced by soft, golden light that filled the space with warmth. It felt familiar, like the first rays of sunlight after a long, stormy night. It felt safe. She stepped toward the light, her feet finally finding something solid to stand on. The ground beneath her felt like earth, firm and steady. And when she looked up, she found herself standing at the edge of a vast open landscape. A field of tall, swaying grass stretched out before her, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. The air was crisp, the scent of the earth and wildflowers carried on a gentle breeze. It was beautiful, peaceful, but something about it felt too perfect, too serene. As she stood there, taking in the peaceful scene, a voice suddenly broke the silence. It wasn't the reflection's voice this time. It wasn't the voice of doubt, fear, or malice. It was something different. A soft, calming voice that seemed to come from within the very landscape itself. "You've done well," the voice said. "You've faced what you needed to face." Laura turned around, but there was no one there. There was no source for the voice, just the empty field, the soft grass, and the golden light. She knew the voice wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to be heard, felt, absorbed. "But this is not the end," the voice continued. "You have more to learn, more to understand." Laura felt a shiver run down her spine, but it wasn't one of fear. It was a shiver of knowing. The reflection, the mirrors, the dark space she had just left behind, those were only the beginning. The reflection had been a test, a glimpse of her inner turmoil, her unresolved past, and the parts of herself she had been running from. But there was more. There was more within her that needed to be explored. More layers to uncover. Laura closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know where this path would lead her, or what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid. She felt a sense of clarity, a deep understanding that this was only the start of something larger, something she would have to face piece by piece. She opened her eyes, the vast landscape before her now feeling like a new beginning, one that stretched out as far as she could see. And as the light enveloped her, she realized that this was the first time she felt truly at peace. The voice whispered again, gentle yet certain, "You are ready." As the light grew brighter, Laura stepped forward, taking her first step into the unknown. But this time, she wasn't running from herself. She was walking toward her future, embracing every part of her, both the light and the darkness. And as she moved forward, the landscape began to shift. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field. The night was coming, but she wasn't afraid of it anymore. The darkness didn't own her. It was simply another part of the journey, another step forward. The light surrounded her, and for the first time, Laura felt whole, complete. She wasn't defined by the reflection, by the mirror, by the fear. She was defined by herself, and in the distance the stars began to shine. The world around Laura continued to shift, evolving with each step she took. As the last rays of sunlight vanished beyond the horizon, the field she stood in seemed to stretch endlessly. But now there was something more, something different. The once calm, peaceful landscape had transformed. The sky was a swirling mix of deep blues and purples, as though the heavens themselves had come alive, a vast tapestry of stars flickering above her, each one pulsing with an eerie but comforting light. The wind, soft and gentle moments before now, whispered across the land with a quiet urgency, like a secret being carried just out of reach. Laura stopped, her heart slowing as she took in the scene. The transition felt seamless, as if the world had always existed in this twilight state, just waiting for her to arrive. Her mind whirled the remnants of her past life, of the reflections, and the dark place she had escaped, still fresh in her thoughts. But now, they didn't seem to matter. They weren't the defining parts of her anymore. She had stepped beyond them, and here, in this strange new world, she felt like she could finally breathe. There were no mirrors here, no reflections to distort her image. It was just her, the earth beneath her feet, and the sky stretching infinitely above. The voice, soft and soothing, came again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the same voice that had whispered from the darkness. It was warmer, more familiar, like a part of her she had once known but forgotten. It was a voice that offered not answers, but possibilities. "You've come far, Laura." It said the words, caressing her ears like a long-lost melody. But the journey is only just beginning. The path ahead will not be easy, but it will be yours to walk. Every step you take will shape you. It will reveal who you truly are. Laura closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the weight of the words settle in. She had already faced so much, her darkest fears, the reflection, the suffocating darkness. And now, here she was, standing at the edge of something new, something vast. She couldn't yet understand it, but she felt its pull. There was something important here, something waiting for her. She could feel it deep in her bones. Taking a slow, deliberate step forward, she began walking through the field, the grass brushing gently against her legs, the earth cool beneath her feet. The landscape was still changing, not rapidly, but steadily. The ground beneath her seemed to shift with each step, revealing new paths, new horizons. She could feel the air growing thicker, richer, as though each breath she took was drawing her deeper into the heart of this place. It was no longer a simple field. It was a living, breathing world, and she was part of it now. The stars above grew brighter, illuminating the path ahead. But there was something else, something unusual. The stars weren't just lights. They were eyes. They twinkled and blinked as though they were alive, watching her, guiding her. Every time she looked up, a new constellation would form a shifting pattern of stars that seemed to speak to her in ways words could not. "You are never truly alone," the voice whispered again, its tone softer this time. "We are all connected. Everything you encounter in this world and every place you visit is a reflection of who you are, a reflection of what you carry within yourself." She paused, the weight of the words settling in her chest. What did it mean? Ahead, the field began to part, and a narrow path formed, winding its way toward a distant hill. At the top, the silhouette of a structure emerged, an ancient stone temple, its spires reaching high into the sky, bathed in the ethereal light of the stars. It stood there quiet and powerful, as though it had been waiting for her. It called to her, a distant beacon of both mystery and promise. Laura felt her heart race as she turned toward the path, her steps now surer, her resolve stronger. She had faced the reflection of her fears, and she had emerged from the darkness, but she knew deep down that she had not yet faced everything. The reflection had merely been the first trial. There was more to discover, more to uncover about herself, about the world she had entered. The temple at the hilltop felt like the next piece of the puzzle, the next key to unlocking the deeper truths that awaited her. As she walked toward the path, a strange sense of anticipation began to bubble up inside her. She wasn't running away anymore. She wasn't hiding from the parts of herself she had been afraid to face. She was walking toward them. The fear had faded, replaced by a quiet certainty that this journey was hers to shape, hers to decide. Whatever this world was, it was a reflection of her. It held the answers, yes, but it also held the challenges, the struggles, and the growth she needed to face to truly understand who she was. The first step she took onto the path was like a release. The tension that had clung to her for so long was finally starting to melt away. The journey ahead would be difficult, yes. There would be obstacles and revelations that would test her. But for the first time, she welcomed the uncertainty. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead, because she now understood that she was no longer the person who had wandered in fear. She had transformed into someone stronger, someone who could embrace both the light and the dark within her. As she climbed the path toward the temple, the wind began to shift, growing warmer, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. The sky above seemed to pulse the stars, now moving in a dance that mirrored her steps. She was not alone. She was never alone. The temple loomed closer now, its stone walls shimmering in the ethereal light, and Laura could feel it, the pull. She was on the edge of something greater. The temple was not just a structure. It was a gateway, a place where the truths of this world and her own could finally be revealed. The door to her future stood before her, and she was ready to walk through it. Step forward, the voice whispered again this time, carrying a sense of finality. The truth awaits you. But remember, it is not what you expect. It is what you are meant to find. With one final breath, Laura stepped forward into the shadow of the temple, ready to face whatever awaited her. And as the doors creaked open, revealing the mysteries within, Laura knew one thing for certain. This was her journey, and it was only just beginning. The temple loomed before Laura, its ancient stone walls bathed in the soft, shimmering light of the stars. The air around her seemed to hum with an energy she could feel deep within her chest, a quiet vibration that echoed through the soles of her feet, urging her onward. The path had led her here to this moment, and as she stood before the massive, intricately carved doors, she felt a sense of destiny, a pull that was too strong to ignore. With a deep breath, she placed her hand on the door. The stone was cool to the touch, smooth yet weathered by time. The carvings that adorned it were unlike anything she had ever seen, an intricate design of spiraling patterns, symbols she couldn't decipher, but somehow felt connected to. Her fingers traced over the markings, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to hold its breath. The wind stilled, and the rustling of the grass faded into the background, leaving only the soft beat of her heart in her ears. For a brief second, she hesitated. What lay beyond those doors? What truths awaited her? There was a certain fear, a primal instinct that told her to turn back, to walk away from what lay beyond the threshold. But deep inside, she knew she couldn't. The reflection, her darkest self, had been the first challenge, and now she had to face what came next. The voice had told her the truth was waiting, but it had also warned her that it might not be what she expected. With a steadying breath, Laura pushed the door open. It creaked loudly as it shifted on ancient hinges, and as it opened fully, she stepped inside. The room was vast and empty, the walls lined with columns that stretched high into the shadows above. The only light came from the soft glow that radiated from the walls, illuminating the floor in a pattern of shifting shapes, like shadows dancing to an unheard rhythm. The air was thick with the scent of incense, the kind that could both soothe and stir the mind, making it hard to think clearly. In the center of the room, a pedestal stood, its surface smooth and bare except for one object, a large crystal orb. It gleamed in the low light, its surface reflecting the faint patterns on the floor. As Laura stepped closer, she felt the pull of it, like it was calling to her, waiting for her to touch it, to understand its purpose. She had no idea what it was or why it was there, but something deep within her urged her to approach. She hesitated only for a moment before she reached out her fingers, brushing the surface of the orb. The moment her skin made contact, the room seemed to shudder, the walls trembling ever so slightly. A faint hum filled the space, growing louder with every second. She could feel the energy in the room shifting like something ancient. Something powerful was awakening. Suddenly, the orb began to glow with an intense, blinding light, and Laura took a step back, shielding her eyes from the brilliance. But even as the light filled the room, she didn't feel fear. Instead, there was a deep sense of knowing. This was part of the journey. This was what she had come for. The light seemed to form into a shape, an image vague at first, but gradually becoming clearer. Laura blinked, focusing on it, and realized that what was forming before her was a reflection of herself. But it wasn't the twisted reflection she had seen in the mirror. This was something else entirely. It was her, but it was not. Her reflection was older, wiser, more confident. It stood tall, its eyes bright with purpose, a stark contrast to the fearful and uncertain version of herself she had left behind. "You've come far." Laura, the voice, echoed once more, but this time it didn't come from the walls or the air. It came from the orb itself, from the very heart of this place. "This is the truth you've been seeking. This is who you are meant to be." Laura stood still, her eyes locked on the vision of herself before her. For the first time, she didn't feel repulsed. She didn't feel shame or guilt. She simply felt right. This reflection wasn't some twisted, dark version of herself. It was the part of her she had buried for so long, the strength, the confidence, the wisdom that had always been there waiting to emerge. It was the part of her she had never dared to embrace. For a long moment she just stared at herself, watching as the reflection smiled gently, as though it had known this moment would come. Then, slowly, the reflection stepped forward, just as she had done earlier in the temple. But now, there was no fear in Laura's heart, no hesitation. She stepped forward too. The moment their hands touched, the orb flared with light, and the room seemed to shift once again. But this time, the change was different. Instead of the overwhelming surge of power she had felt before, there was a calm, a stillness that settled over her like a warm blanket. The reflection faded, and in its place, Laura felt something inside her change. She could feel it, a weight lifting from her shoulders, an invisible burden she hadn't known she was carrying slipping away. It was as though the very essence of the reflection had merged with her, becoming a part of who she was meant to be. She felt whole. The orb, once so bright and blinding, now dimmed its glow, soft and gentle. The hum that had filled the room faded, replaced by the steady sound of her own breath. She was no longer standing in the temple alone. She had finally come to terms with herself, with the reflection, with the darkness she had once feared. It was no longer an enemy. It was a part of her, a part that had always been there, just waiting for her to accept it. And with that acceptance, the temple seemed to transform. The walls brightened, the columns straightened, and the air became clearer, lighter. The oppressive weight that had filled the space before was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. The truth, whatever it had been, was now known. Laura was no longer running from herself. She was no longer afraid of what she might find. She was ready. The door at the far end of the temple opened with a soft creak, revealing the path beyond. And beyond that path lay the unknown, a future that was hers to shape. It wasn't a perfect future. It wasn't a future without pain or struggle. But it was hers. And that was enough. Laura took a step toward the door, the light from the orb still warm in her chest. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The journey she had started was far from over. But she was no longer the same person who had first walked into the darkness. She was someone new, someone whole. And as she stepped forward, she knew that she could face whatever came next because she was finally ready. The door opened slowly, revealing a path that stretched out into a dense, misty forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint aroma of wildflowers. The light that had filled the temple now dimmed, but it didn't disappear. It was still there, a soft glow surrounding her, guiding her forward. She could feel the ground beneath her feet change. The stone of the temple floor was now replaced by soft, moss-covered earth, each step muffled by the thick carpet of leaves and underbrush. Laura paused at the entrance of the forest, taking a deep breath, letting the cool, fresh air fill her lungs. The tension that had gripped her for so long, the fear of the reflection, the anxiety about what lay ahead seemed to have melted away. She felt calm, grounded, as though every step she took would bring her closer to understanding, to peace. And though the forest stretched on in front of her dark and foreboding, she didn't feel afraid. The whispers of the past, of the darkness she had faced, no longer held power over her. They had become fragments, pieces of her journey, not chains that bound her. With a steadying breath, Laura stepped into the forest. The trees around her towered high above their branches, thick and gnarled, creating a canopy that filtered the light. The air was cool, yet there was warmth in the glow that still surrounded her. It was as if the very world had conspired to protect her, to guide her along this path. The further she walked, the more the forest seemed to come alive. The leaves rustled with the soft murmur of the wind, and the distant calls of birds echoed in the silence. But there was no fear in those sounds. They didn't feel threatening. They felt like a welcome, an invitation to continue. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the path ahead became clearer, and the trees began to thin. She found herself standing before a clearing, the moonlight shining down in soft beams, illuminating what lay before her. In the center of the clearing stood a massive tree, ancient and grand, its roots sprawling across the earth like the veins of the world itself. The tree seemed to pulse with life, its branches twisting toward the sky, heavy with the weight of ages. And at the base of the tree, nestled in the crook of its roots, was a stone altar covered in ivy and moss. Laura approached cautiously, drawn by the presence of the tree, as though something deep within her soul was calling her to it. Her hand reached out, brushing the rough bark of the tree, and the moment she touched it, a surge of energy passed through her. It wasn't painful. It wasn't overwhelming. It was awakening, like she had just connected with something ancient, something that had always been there waiting for her to find it. A soft whisper filled her ears again, but this time, it wasn't the voice of the reflection. This time, it was a deeper, older voice, one that resonated with the very earth beneath her feet. "You have walked far, Laura." The voice said the words, echoing in the stillness of the forest. "You have faced your fears, embraced your truth. But now you must understand, the journey you are on is not just about you." Laura's heart quickened. The voice seemed to come from the very air, the very earth itself. It was so deep, so profound, that it left her breathless. She felt connected to it in ways she couldn't fully comprehend, as though the forest, the tree, the altar, they were all part of something greater than herself, something vast and eternal. "You are part of the world, Laura," the voice continued. "Your journey is intertwined with the lives of others, with the balance of nature itself. What you have learned, what you have overcome, will shape not only your future, but the future of all things." She stood there, absorbing the words, feeling their weight settle into her chest. This wasn't just her journey. It was a journey that would affect the world around her, the people she encountered, the places she would go. It wasn't just about facing the darkness within herself. It was about understanding the connection between all things, the light and the dark, the fears and the truths, the choices she made, and the ripples they would cause. She turned her gaze to the altar at the base of the tree. It was simple, ancient, yet powerful. Its stone surface was weathered by time, but the symbols carved into it seemed familiar. She couldn't decipher the exact meaning, but the images they spoke to her in ways words could not. It was as though the altar held the key to the next step of her journey. With a deep breath, Laura approached the altar, her hand reaching out to touch the stone. The moment her fingers made contact, a surge of warmth spread through her body. The symbols on the altar seemed to come alive, shifting, changing, revealing a hidden message, a map, a path forward. Her mind raced as she processed what she saw. This was it, the next part of the journey. The path was clearer now, and though it was uncertain, she could feel the pull. This was her calling, her purpose. The reflection, the darkness, the forest. It had all been leading her here to this moment, to this understanding. The path ahead is not always clear. The voice whispered once more, its tone soft but resolute. But you have the strength to walk it. Remember, you are not alone. You never have been. Laura closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words sink deep within her. She had never truly been alone. Not really. The journey she had been on, the struggles she had faced, they had all been preparing her for this moment. She wasn't just walking through this world, moving from one challenge to the next. She was part of it. She was connected to it. And now, it was time to move forward. With a final glance at the altar, Laura turned back to the path that lay ahead. The trees parted the moonlight, guiding her steps, and as she walked, the world around her seemed to shift once again. The forest wasn't just a place. It was alive, and it was waiting for her to take the next step. And this time, she was ready. Ready to face whatever came next. Ready to embrace the unknown. Ready to embrace herself. As Laura continued walking through the forest, she felt a sense of connection to everything around her. The trees, the sky, the soft rustling of the leaves in the wind, they all seemed to be part of the same pulse, the same rhythm. The world was alive in a way she had never fully understood before. It was as if she had stepped into the heart of something ancient, something that had been waiting for her to awaken to it. The path before her stretched onward, winding through the trees, but it didn't feel like a path at all. It felt like a journey not just through the forest, but through herself. The struggles she had faced, the darkness she had fought, they had all been necessary. They had brought her here to this moment of understanding. And as she walked, she realized that she was not just moving through a physical world. She was moving through the layers of her own soul. With every step, the weight of her past seemed to lighten. The shame, the fear, the doubts, they no longer defined her. She had faced them, yes, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned to walk alongside them, to accept them, and in doing so, she had freed herself from their grip. And yet, even though she felt lighter, there was still a sense of something ahead, something waiting for her. She didn't know what it was, but she could feel its presence in the air, like the pull of the horizon just beyond her reach. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees began to thin once more. The moonlight ahead grew brighter, casting long shadows on the ground. The path curved and twisted, leading her toward a clearing. And in the center of the clearing, she saw something that made her pause. There, standing alone in the middle of the moonlit space, was a mirror. It was not like the mirrors she had known before, the reflections that had haunted her, that had twisted her image into something unfamiliar. This mirror was different. It was framed with ivy, its surface smooth and undisturbed, reflecting the light of the moon in a way that seemed almost ethereal. Laura felt an inexplicable pull toward it. She wasn't afraid this time. She didn't hesitate. The journey had brought her to this moment, and she knew she needed to face whatever this mirror represented. As she stepped closer, she could see her reflection, but it wasn't the same as before. The woman in the mirror was different, calmer, more confident, but still undeniably her. Her eyes were steady, no longer clouded with doubt or fear. There was a quiet strength in her expression, a peace that radiated from within. For a long moment, she stood there, gazing at her reflection. She had spent so much of her life running from herself, afraid of what she might find. The mirror had always been a symbol of what she feared, a symbol of her insecurities and self-doubt. But now, as she looked at the woman before her, she saw not weakness, but strength. She saw someone who had endured, who had fought, and who had at last found her way. The reflection smiled at her, as if acknowledging the journey she had undertaken, the growth she had achieved. And then, just as before, it spoke, but this time, there was no malice in its voice. There was only acceptance. You are whole. The voice said softly, the words like a gentle breeze that brushed against her soul. You are not defined by your fears, your doubts, or the shadows of your past. You are the sum of all you have faced, all you have become. And now, you are ready. Laura took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle into her bones. She was ready. She had always been ready. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about accepting who she was fully and completely, and understanding that the journey was not one of escaping herself, but of embracing every part of her. As she continued to gaze into the mirror, the reflection began to fade, the image slowly dissolving into the mist that swirled around her. The air grew lighter, the forest quieter, as though everything was aligning with her newfound understanding. And then, the mirror was gone. The clearing was empty once more, and Laura stood alone beneath the moonlight, feeling the cool breeze caress her skin. But she didn't feel alone in the way she once had. She felt complete, connected to everything around her, to the world, to herself. With one final glance at the moonlit clearing, she turned back to the path, ready to move forward. The forest had changed, yes, but so had she. The weight of her past, the reflection of her fears had been left behind. What lay ahead, she didn't know, but she no longer needed to fear it. She was no longer running from herself. She was walking toward her future, and with every step, the world around her seemed to open up, inviting her to explore, to grow, and to embrace whatever came next. Because now, she knew the truth. She was ready. The forest seemed to breathe around Laura, its ancient trees standing tall like silent witnesses to the passing of time. The air was thick with the smell of earth damp from the morning dew that clung to the leaves. As she continued walking, the path before her grew clearer, more defined. The soft rustling of the leaves and the distant calls of unseen creatures were the only sounds in the quiet stillness of the forest. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet, the earth itself guiding her forward. There was no fear now, no doubt. For the first time in her life, Laura felt at peace with herself. The reflection, the mirror, the darkness, it had all been necessary. They had been the tools that helped her face the parts of herself She had long denied the parts that had kept her bound in chains of self-doubt. But now, with each step she took, she was free. The weight that had once hung over her shoulders, heavy and unyielding, had dissolved. She had accepted who she was, every part of her, her fears, her doubts, her strengths, her flaws, and in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. But there was more. She knew this now deep in her core. This journey, this walk through the forest, it was not just about her. It was a part of something greater, something that connected all things, all people, all moments. The world was not a collection of separate pieces. It was a tapestry woven together by experiences, by choices, by the interconnectedness of all life. And Laura was part of that tapestry. As she walked deeper into the forest, she began to sense something else, something not of this world. It was subtle at first, a shift in the air, a whisper that seemed to come from the trees themselves. It was like the forest was alive, not just in the way that all nature is alive, but in a deeper, more profound sense. She could feel its ancient pulse, like the steady beat of a heart that had been beating long before she was born and would continue to beat long after she was gone. The path led her to a clearing once again, but this one was different. It was not just the space in between the trees, not just the gap where the moonlight spilled in. This clearing was something else entirely. It was like a doorway, an opening to a different realm, one that transcended time and space. The air shimmered with a golden light, soft but powerful, like the glow of 1,000 stars, reflected in a pool of still water. In the center of the clearing stood another structure, this one unlike anything Laura had seen before. It was a stone archway, ancient and weathered, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The symbols etched into the arch were like those she had seen on the altar in the temple, familiar yet foreign. They seemed to pulse with energy, like they were alive, waiting for her to step through them. Laura felt the pull of the arch, felt the energy in the air intensify, wrapping around her like a blanket. She knew this was the next step, the next part of her journey. The voice, the one that had guided her through the darkness, whispered once more, "You have faced your reflection, Laura. You have faced your truth. Now you must step beyond it. There is more to understand, more to become. The path you are on is not just for you. It is for all those who walk alongside you, all those who will come after you. Your journey is part of something greater, something that transcends time and space." The voice was not just in her mind now, it was in her soul. She could feel it like a vibration deep within her, echoing in the very core of her being. She was no longer just an individual. She was part of something larger, something eternal. The journey she had taken had been her own, yes, but it had also been a part of the collective journey of all those who had walked before her and all those who would walk after her. She was connected to them, to all of humanity, to the very heartbeat of the world. Laura stepped forward, her feet carrying her toward the archway. She didn't know what lay beyond it. She didn't need to. She had learned that it wasn't the destination that mattered, but the journey itself, the courage to face the unknown, to walk with purpose, to embrace the changes that came with each step. As she crossed beneath the archway, a wave of energy washed over her, a surge of light and warmth that filled every cell of her body. The world around her seemed to blur for a moment, the boundaries of reality melting away. She felt herself dissolving, merging with the very essence of the world. Time lost its meaning. She was everywhere and nowhere all at once. She could feel the lives of those who had come before her and those who would come after. She could feel the breath of the earth, the pulse of the stars, the quiet hum of the universe. For a brief moment, Laura understood it all, the connection between all things, the cycles of life and death, the endless dance of creation and destruction. She was part of it. She had always been part of it. And in that moment, she was at peace, but just as quickly, the feeling began to fade. The light dimmed, the energy receded, and Laura found herself standing in a new space, still in the forest, but somehow different. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, and fresh rain, the sky above, now a deep, rich purple. The first stars beginning to twinkle in the vast expanse. She looked around and saw something she hadn't noticed before. In the distance, there were figures, people. Some were familiar, their faces a blend of those she had known in her life. Others were strangers, faces she had never seen, but somehow recognized. They were standing in the distance, waiting. Not for her, perhaps, but for something. For their own journey, their own path to unfold. And then she understood. The forest wasn't just a place. It was a crossroads. It was a meeting point for all those who had walked the path before her and all those who would follow. It was a place where lives intertwined, where stories converged. And she was a part of that story. She took a deep breath, her heart steady, and continued walking. The path ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer felt the need to know everything. The journey wasn't about certainty. It was about growth, about stepping forward with purpose, embracing each moment as it came. And so she walked, toward the unknown, toward the future, toward whatever came next, because now she was ready. The moon had risen higher, casting long shadows that stretched across the forest floor. The path before Laura seemed to grow darker, the trees becoming more dense, their branches heavy with age. Yet despite the enveloping gloom, the light that surrounded her remained soft, but steady, like the glow of distant stars guiding her forward. She could feel the ground beneath her shift as she walked, not in the literal sense, but more in the way the world itself seemed to be responding to her every step. The earth hummed with life, and each step she took was in rhythm with it, as though the land was breathing with her. Her mind, once clouded by fear and doubt, now felt clear, focused. Every element of her being, her heart, her soul was aligned in a way it had never been before. The journey through the darkness, the struggles she had faced, had been the tools of transformation. Each trial had been necessary, each challenge a step toward understanding herself, toward embracing the unknown. It wasn't about arriving at some destination. It was about the process, the unfolding of the self. She had learned to walk through the darkness, to face her reflection without turning away. The mirror had shown her the truth of who she was, not just the person she saw in the glass, but the person beneath the surface, the strength that lay hidden behind the fears. And in doing so, she had taken her first true step toward freedom. But now, the next part of her journey was before her. It was unclear, uncertain, but there was no hesitation in her heart. She was no longer afraid of the unknown. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds of the world seemed to shift. The distant calls of birds faded, replaced by the faint rustle of something more distant. A wind stirred, but it wasn't just the wind. It felt like a whisper, like something or someone was trying to communicate with her. She stopped for a moment, trying to listen, but the sound was subtle, almost imperceptible. It wasn't words, not in any human sense. It was more like a presence and energy that surrounded her, gently nudging her forward. The trees ahead parted, revealing a large stone archway, much like the one she had passed before. But this one was different. It was ancient, worn by time and weather, and yet it held a strange power. It stood alone in the center of the clearing, its stone covered in vines and moss, but the energy around it was undeniable. As she stepped closer, she could feel the air change, thickening with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just another archway, it was a gateway, one that held the promise of something deeper, something more profound. Laura approached cautiously, but she didn't feel fear. Instead, she felt the familiar pull, the same pull she had felt before the temple, before the forest. It was the call of the journey, the call of the path she had chosen. She placed a hand on the stone arch, her fingers brushing the cold surface. And as she did, a ripple of energy passed through her. It wasn't painful, but it was powerful. The earth beneath her feet seemed to shift, and the world around her seemed to hold its breath. "You have come far," a voice said, not from the arch itself, but from the air around her, echoing in her mind like a soft whisper. It wasn't the voice of the reflection this time. It was different, ancient, but it carried a sense of knowing, of wisdom beyond time. "You have walked through the darkness, faced the parts of yourself that you feared. Now you must face the world beyond." The words hung in the air, their meaning settling into her heart. She had faced herself, her fears, her doubts, her reflection. But there was more. There was the world beyond herself, the world that had always been there, waiting for her to see it, to understand it. The archway began to shimmer, the light around it intensifying. The shadows that had once seemed so oppressive now receded like mist clearing from the path ahead. Laura stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the arch, and the moment she did, everything changed. The world around her was no longer the forest. It was vast and open, the sky stretching out in front of her, an endless horizon that seemed to go on forever. The landscape was a blend of rolling hills, valleys, and wide open spaces. The air was different here, crisp, but filled with the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. The light that had surrounded her was now a golden hue spilling over the land, like the first rays of dawn, warm and inviting. It felt like a world untouched, a place untouched by time, where every blade of grass, every tree, every stone held a story of its own. Laura stood still for a moment, taking it all in. The beauty of the world before her was overwhelming, but there was something more. It was as though the very land was speaking to her, its energy connecting with hers, pulling her deeper into this new reality. She could feel the earth beneath her, its pulse, like the beat of her own heart. She could hear the whispers in the wind, the voices of those who had come before her, and those who would come after. This was the next step of her journey, not just through herself, but through the world around her. The reflection had been only the beginning. Now it was time to understand the connection between all things, the unity that existed between herself and the world, between all living things, was something she had only just begun to comprehend. But now she could feel it deep within her. She was a part of it, a thread in the great tapestry of life. And as she stood there, surrounded by the vastness of this new world, Laura understood. The reflection had shown her her truth, but now she had to live it. To walk through this world, not as a separate entity, but as part of something greater. To understand the ebb and flow of life, the balance between light and dark, between joy and sorrow, between growth and decay. With that understanding, she began to walk again. The path was open before her, and though it was still unclear where it would lead, she was no longer afraid. She had already faced her own darkness. Now she was ready to face the world. The journey ahead was not just about her, but about the world around her. And with each step, she would learn, grow, and embrace the interconnectedness of all things. This was her purpose, her place in the world, And as she walked, the horizon before her seemed to grow wider, the landscape more expansive. The world was waiting, and she was ready to walk through it, step by step. As Laura walked through the vast landscape, a sense of deep connection filled her with each step. The wind, gentle and constant, seemed to push her forward, guiding her through the endless fields. The soft whispers that had once been a distant hum in her ears now felt like a part of the world itself, speaking not with words, but with sensations. She could feel the pulse of life in the earth beneath her feet, in the trees that lined the horizon, in the very sky above her head. Everything was alive, connected in a way that was impossible to explain but undeniable to experience. She passed through meadows of tall golden grass, the blades swaying with the breeze. The sunlight filtering through the trees cast long shadows across the ground, creating an intricate dance of light and darkness on the earth. For a moment, she closed her eyes and simply breathed in the air. The rich, earthy scent of the land mingled with the sweetness of flowers that grew in abundance along the path. The air was fresh, pure, and full of life. It felt like the beginning of something new, something she could not fully understand yet, but could feel deep in her bones. As she walked, her mind began to wander back to everything she had left behind: the reflection, the temple, the mirror, the forest. She had learned so much on that journey. It had been a path of self-discovery, a path of embracing the darkest corners of her soul and learning to live alongside her fears. But here in this new world, she felt no shadow of doubt. There was no longer a reflection to wrestle with, no inner turmoil to overcome. She had let go of her need to control everything, to fix every imperfection. Instead, she had accepted herself, flaws, strengths, darkness, and light. And now, in the stillness of this vast landscape, it felt as though the world was doing the same. The sky above her shifted the colors of dusk, gradually deepening into the soft hues of twilight. Stars began to twinkle in the distance, their glow growing brighter as the light from the setting sun faded. But the night felt different here, not dark and foreboding, but comforting, as if the very sky were embracing her. The shadows weren't something to fear. They were simply part of the whole, just as much a part of her as the light. As the twilight settled around her, a new sound caught her attention. It was faint at first, a low hum, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder the further she walked. It wasn't like the winds she had heard before. It was something more rhythmic, more deliberate. The sound seemed to be calling her, beckoning her toward the heart of the land. Her curiosity piqued. She quickened her pace, the ground beneath her softening into a path of smooth stone, as though the land itself was guiding her forward. The path curved, and in the distance she saw a faint glow. It was soft, like the flicker of a firefly, but it was steady, drawing her toward it with an irresistible pull. The landscape seemed to open up around her, revealing a wide open space, a plateau high above the valley below. And there, in the center of the plateau, stood a large structure, an ancient stone circle. It was not a temple nor a tower, but a circle of stones, each one weathered by time, etched with symbols and runes that were unfamiliar to her. They stood tall and strong, their surfaces covered in moss and vines, yet they emanated an undeniable energy. The hum she had heard before seemed to originate from the stones, each one resonating with a quiet power. It was a sound that vibrated in her chest, not from the air around her, but from deep within the earth itself. The stones seemed alive, pulsing with energy, calling her to step closer. Laura felt drawn to the center of the circle, where a large stone pedestal stood. It was covered in symbols, similar to the ones she had seen before, but these were more intricate than anything she had encountered. As she stepped into the center of the circle, the humming grew louder, and the stones seemed to respond to her presence. The glow that had once been distant now filled the air as though the stones were radiating light from within. Her heart raced with anticipation. She was no longer walking alone. There was something here, something ancient, something that transcended time. It felt like the land was waiting for her to understand its language, its rhythm. She could feel the pull of the energy in the stones, the hum of the earth, and she knew that she was standing on the precipice of something greater than herself. She had come far further than she could have imagined when she first entered the forest. But this was the culmination of her journey. The reflection had been a starting point, a place to understand herself. But now, she was standing on the threshold of understanding something far more vast. As she reached out to touch one of the stones, the hum deepened, vibrating in her bones, and the symbols on the stone began to glow. The energy around her intensified, and for a brief moment, everything felt suspended in time. The stars overhead twinkled brighter, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The connection between herself and the world around her was undeniable now. She was a part of this land, and this land was a part of her. The air shimmered, and a soft voice, not from the stones, but from within the earth itself, spoke to her. "You have learned to embrace your own truth, Laura. Now you must understand the truth of the world. The journey is not over. It has only just begun. You are the keeper of this knowledge, the bearer of this truth." The voice was not one she could hear with her ears. It was a voice that resonated in her chest, deep within her soul. It was ancient, yet familiar, and it was clear that this was the beginning of her next chapter. The stone she touched began to pulse with light, and as the glow spread, the rest of the stones responded. One by one, each stone began to glow, in turn their energy converging in the center, creating a brilliant light that enveloped Laura. For a brief moment, she felt as though she were being pulled in every direction toward the stars, toward the earth, toward the vastness of time and space. And then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded. The hum of the stones settled into silence, and Laura stood in the center of the circle, her heart pounding. She had felt something shift, something change deep within her. It was as though the stones had shared their energy with her, had transferred their knowledge, their wisdom into her very being. As she stepped back from the pedestal, she knew that her journey was far from over. This was just one chapter in a much larger story, one that stretched beyond the boundaries of time, beyond the confines of her own understanding. The world had opened up before her, and now she had a new purpose. She was connected to something larger, something older, and with that connection came a responsibility. She wasn't just walking through this world, she was a part of its story. And with each step, she would help shape its future. The glow from the stone circle slowly faded, but Laura's heart still beat with the rhythm of the energy she had just felt. The pulse of the stones had reverberated through her soul, leaving behind a quiet hum deep within her chest, as though the entire world had left its mark upon her. She felt different now, as though something fundamental had shifted within her. She was no longer just an observer of the world. She was now an active participant, a part of something vast and intricate, something much larger than herself. As the last trace of the glow faded, the forest returned to its quiet state, the stars overhead twinkling softly as the night deepened. But Laura didn't feel alone. The stillness of the land didn't feel empty. It felt alive in ways she couldn't quite articulate. She had walked through the mirror of her own reflection, had emerged from the darkness of her doubts, And now, she stood on the edge of something even greater, a world she had yet to fully understand, a world she was now bound to. Her journey had always been about finding herself, and now that she had reached this point, she realized something. The journey wasn't over. It was merely unfolding in new ways. She had shed the fears that once defined her, and in doing so had become something new, something stronger. The reflection had been a part of that transformation, but it wasn't the end. The world, this vast interconnected world, was the next step, the next lesson to learn. She turned away from the stone circle and began walking once more, but this time her steps felt different. She wasn't walking with uncertainty anymore. There was a sense of purpose in her stride, a quiet certainty that had never existed before. She had felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the rhythm of the stars above, and she knew she was meant to walk this path. The land, the stones, the very air around her, they had spoken to her, and she had listened. Now it was time to move forward, to discover what lay beyond the forest, beyond the stones, and beyond herself. As she walked, the land around her began to change. The soft grass beneath her feet gave way to a rugged terrain, the ground uneven, the path becoming steeper. The trees thinned out, and soon she found herself at the base of a great mountain. It loomed in the distance, its peaks high above, touching the sky. The mountain was imposing, but it didn't intimidate her. Instead, it called to her just as the stones had. She could feel its energy, its power pulling her forward. It wasn't a force that demanded she climb it. It was an invitation, a beckoning to come closer to understand what lay hidden in its towering heights. She gazed up at the mountain for a long moment, the wind picking up and swirling around her, the scent of pine and earth filling her lungs. The stars above her were brighter now, their light casting long shadows on the mountain slopes. The air felt thin, charged with an energy that was both ancient and timeless. It was as if this mountain had been waiting for her, as though its very stones had been shaped by the forces of the earth itself, just as she had been shaped by her own experiences. Without thinking, she began to climb. The path was steep and rugged, but her body moved with a sense of ease, her hands gripping the rough rocks, her feet finding purchase on the uneven surface. She wasn't afraid of the climb, nor of the mountain itself. She knew that this was part of her journey. This was where she was meant to go next. Each step took her higher, closer to the peak, closer to the answers that awaited her. The climb was difficult at times. The path was narrow, the rocks sharp, but she pressed on, determined. Her breath came in steady, measured bursts, her muscles straining, but she didn't stop. She knew that with every step, she was not just ascending the mountain. She was rising within herself, rising above the fears and doubts that had once held her back. The mountain represented everything that had once seemed impossible, the challenges, the obstacles, the darkness, and as she climbed, she could feel herself becoming more attuned to the rhythm of the world around her. The earth beneath her feet, the wind in the trees, the night sky above everything was part of this moment, part of her journey. Hours seemed to pass as she climbed through. She had no concept of time. The mountain stretched on its peaks now within reach, and yet the higher she climbed, the more she felt the land begin to shift. The air grew colder, thinner, and the terrain grew harsher. But she didn't falter. She didn't hesitate. She felt the pull of the summit, the draw of the unknown that lay ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the top. The peak was flat, surrounded by a circle of stones, similar to those in the forest, ancient and worn, but radiating the same energy. In the center of the peak was a stone altar, much like the one she had seen before. But this one was different. It was larger, its surface covered in intricate carvings, symbols that pulsed with a quiet, rhythmic glow. Laura stepped toward the altar, her heart pounding with anticipation. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't need to. The journey had never been about knowing the outcome. It had been about the courage to face the unknown, to trust the process, and to move forward step by step. As her hand reached out to touch the altar, a surge of energy passed through her. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was powerful. The symbols on the stone began to glow brighter, their energy vibrating in sync with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. And then everything stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath. The wind stilled the stars, paused in their dance, and for a moment, Laura felt suspended in time. She had crossed a threshold. She had reached the peak, not just of the mountain, but of her journey. The reflection was behind her, the darkness was behind her, and now she stood at the edge of something new, something vast, something unknown. The voice, soft and deep, resonated in her soul once again. You have come far, Laura. But this is not the end. It is only the beginning. The voice was familiar now. It was no longer distant, no longer detached. It was part of her, part of the world, part of everything. Laura closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. And in that breath, she felt the entire universe expand and contract with her. The mountain beneath her feet, the stars above her, the wind in the trees. They were all one, all connected. And now she was part of that connection. She had reached the summit, and she was ready. The silence that surrounded Laura on the mountaintop was profound. The air had thinned, and the coolness of the high altitude wrapped itself around her like a cloak. Yet despite the chill, a warmth radiated within her chest, a quiet fire of understanding. Her heart beat in rhythm with the pulse of the earth beneath her, and she realized as the silence stretched that this moment, this exact moment, was the culmination of everything she had ever searched for. It was not an arrival, but a transition. She had shed old skins, crossed dark thresholds, and faced herself in the most raw and vulnerable ways. Now, standing at the peak, surrounded by the glowing stones, the quiet energy in the air, she understood that this was a new beginning, new. The altar in front of her seemed to hum with its own rhythm, responding to her presence, to the newfound peace within her. She stood still for a moment, absorbing the sight of the mountains stretching out before her, vast and untouched, like the horizon of her soul, finally becoming visible. The night sky, dotted with stars, seemed more expansive than ever before, as if inviting her to look beyond herself, beyond the immediate, into the endless possibilities ahead. A faint breeze stirred, and for the first time since stepping into this world, it didn't feel like a force outside of her. It felt like a conversation, a whisper shared between the earth and her. It carried the scent of pine and wildflowers of distant lands she had never seen, and with it the subtle undercurrent of something much larger, a call to continue. She closed her eyes and listened, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the world. And then she heard it, a soft, melodic hum, a song ancient and timeless, rising from the earth itself. It was as though the land was singing to her, welcoming her into a deeper understanding of the world. The sound wasn't like anything she had ever heard. It was felt in her chest, resonating through her being, a harmony woven into the fabric of the world. With a deep breath, Laura opened her eyes and looked around her once again. The stones on the ground, the symbols etched into them, began to glow brighter, their edges softening as if revealing something hidden, something meant for her. The light spread, weaving through the air, filling the space around her. Without thinking, she stepped forward. The moment her foot touched the ground beyond the altar, the energy in the air surged forward, like a tide washing over her. with a warmth so intense that for a moment she thought she might be swallowed by it. But then she realized the warmth wasn't overwhelming, it was embracing. The stones around her began to hum in harmony, their energy rising, melding with hers, and in that moment, the world before her transformed. The stone circle seemed to dissolve into mist, and she was no longer on the mountaintop. She was standing in the middle of a vast, endless landscape, the ground beneath her rich and fertile, stretching out in all directions. The land was wild, untamed, and yet there was a profound order to it, one that could only be understood through feeling, not through logic. Before her, the horizon stretched endlessly. In the distance, towering mountains rose their peaks shrouded in mist. A river wound through the valley, sparkling in the moonlight, its waters gleaming with silver like a ribbon of light in the dark expanse. The forest on either side was dense and full of life, the sounds of the animals echoing in the distance, all of it vibrating with the same energy that she now felt surging within her. This place, this realm, was unlike any world she had ever known. It was alive, and it was waiting, and then she understood. This was not a physical space. It was a reflection of the world within her, a reflection of her spirit, of her soul. The journey she had undertaken, the struggles, the growth had led her to this understanding. She was not just walking through the world anymore. She was a part of it. The land, the sky, the creatures that roamed it was all part of her, just as she was part of it. The voice which had guided her through the forest and up the mountain now filled her mind once again. But this time, it was no longer separate. It was her voice. It was a part of her. The truth, the wisdom that had been passed down through the ages now resonated within her. It was her truth. "You have arrived," the voice whispered, not as a command, but as an acknowledgement. But remember, the journey has always been about learning. It has always been about connecting, not just to the world around you, but to the world within. This is your world now. It is shaped by your choices, your actions, your understanding. It is not for you to dominate, but to understand, to nurture. Laura stood still, her eyes closed, her breath steady, as the voice continued to speak in her mind. You have walked through your fears, through your own darkness, and in doing so, you have unlocked a new part of yourself. Now it is time to share this understanding with others, to help guide them as you have been guided. She took a deep breath, allowing the words to settle in her soul. She had learned so much about herself in the course of her journey. She had come to understand her fears, her doubts, and her strength. But now, she had learned something greater. She was not alone. None of us are. We are all connected, all part of the same fabric of existence, woven together through time and space. Our journeys are different, but the essence remains the same. As the voice faded, Laura felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The air around her had grown still, but there was no emptiness. It was filled with life, with purpose. She knew now that her journey had no end. It would continue not just through the world she could see, but through the connections she made, through the people she would meet, and through the ways she could share the wisdom she had gained. And so, with a heart full of understanding and a spirit at peace, Laura took her first step into the world ahead. The path was unclear, and there would be more challenges to face, more lessons to learn. But she was no longer afraid. She was ready to walk this path not as a solitary traveler, but as a part of a greater whole, part of a shared journey that connected all things. The world was vast, and yet in that moment, it felt small, as if she was connected to every inch of it. And she knew with certainty that wherever the path led, she would find her way. The path before Laura was open and undefined, stretching out into the distance like a river of possibility. There was no clear destination, no map to guide her steps, only the pull of the world and her own heart. She could feel the weight of the earth beneath her, steady and constant, but also alive with potential, as if the land itself was breathing with her, in time. With her pulse, the journey had no end, she realized. The journey was in every step she took, every decision she made, every connection she formed. The world was vast, yes, but it was also deeply interconnected. Every soul, every living thing was a thread in the fabric of existence, woven together by a shared energy, a shared purpose. As she walked forward, the world around her seemed to expand. The forest she had just passed through stretched out endlessly, its trees rising high into the sky, their leaves shimmering in the soft light of the moon. In the distance, the mountains loomed, their peaks still covered in mist, but they didn't feel distant now. They were part of her journey, part of the world she had come to understand. Every landscape, every creature, every element of nature was a reflection of something within her, and as she moved through the world, she could feel their energy guiding her forward. The stars above twinkled brightly, their light a soft glow against the dark sky, but there was no longer any distance between them and her. She was part of the sky, part of the stars, just as she was part of the earth. She had always been connected to everything around her, but now she could feel it deep within her, like a quiet hum that resonated in her chest. But even as she walked, she knew that the journey was not just about finding peace or understanding herself. It was about sharing that understanding with others. The voice had been right. Her path was not one she walked alone. It was a path that would intersect with others, a path that would help others find their way. Just as she had found hers, she had learned so much, but she knew there was still much to discover. The world was vast, and there were so many experiences waiting to be embraced. She was ready for them, but this time, she didn't feel rushed. She didn't need to rush. The journey wasn't something that could be finished because it was ongoing, constantly evolving. Every moment was a new opportunity to learn, to grow, to connect. The moonlight bathed the world in a soft silver glow as she walked along the path. The wind began to pick up, and the air around her hummed with a quiet song, like a lullaby carried on the breeze. She listened, closing her eyes, letting the melody wash over her. The wind wasn't just a physical force. It was a voice, a presence that spoke to her in a language older than words. The journey is not always clear, the wind seemed to whisper, but it is always worth taking. You are never alone. There is always a connection, always a thread that binds you to the world. Laura smiled to herself, the quiet hum of the wind mixing with the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. She had made it this far, not by seeking answers, but by embracing the unknown. And now, standing in the vastness of the world, she knew that the answers would come when the time was right. She didn't need to rush. She didn't need to worry. The world was full of wisdom, and all she had to do was listen, to be open, to be present. She walked for what felt like hours, the path winding through forests, over streams, across fields, each landscape more beautiful and vibrant than the last. She was no longer concerned with the destination. She wasn't searching for something outside of herself. She was simply walking, living, and experiencing. Every moment held meaning, and with each step, she felt herself becoming more attuned to the rhythm of the world. Eventually, she reached a clearing. It wasn't like the other clearings she had passed through. This one felt different, more serene, more tranquil. The air was still, the trees around her silent, as if they too were waiting. In the center of the clearing, there was a small pool of water, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the moon above. Laura approached the pool, her footsteps soft on the ground, and crouched down beside it. She gazed into the water, and for a moment she saw not just her reflection, but the reflection of the world around her. The trees, the stars, the moon, they all rippled in the water, their images melding with hers. And in that moment, Laura understood something profound. The reflection she had once feared was not something separate from her. It was a part of her, a part that had always existed, always shaped her, but one that she had not fully understood until now. The water mirrored not just her image, but the world itself. It reflected everything, her strengths, her weaknesses, her fears, her dreams, and it reminded her that she was not alone. She was a part of the world, just as the world was a part of her. Every moment, every experience, every person she met was part of the same reflection, part of the same truth. Her hand hovered over the surface of the water, and as she touched it, the ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection for just a moment. But when the ripples settled, the water was calm once again, and the reflection had returned to its original form. The image of herself, the image of the world, was whole once more. Laura sat back, her heart full, and a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She understood now. The journey was never about finding an endpoint. It was about living each moment, embracing each experience, and accepting every part of herself. The reflection, the fear, the darkness, those were just pieces of the greater whole. And in accepting them, she had found peace. She stood up slowly, taking one last look at the still water before turning away. The journey ahead was unknown, but for the first time she felt ready. She wasn't seeking answers anymore. She was simply living, and that was enough. As she walked away from the clearing, the stars above her twinkled softly, and the wind whispered in her ear, carrying the promise of new adventures, new connections, and new understandings. The world was vast, but it was also her home. She was never alone. With each step, she was more herself, and the world was more hers. And that was how she had always been meant to walk this path, step by step, breath by breath, connected to everything and everyone. The journey had no end, but she was finally at peace with that. As Laura continued walking through the endless expanse, her steps no longer seemed uncertain. The world felt like it had become an extension of herself. The earth beneath her feet, the stars above the wind that brushed against her skin, they were all reflections of her inner peace, her newfound understanding. The night sky stretched endlessly above her, and she knew that no matter where she went, she would always be part of this vast, interconnected web of life. The path before her twisted gently, leading her through a dense forest where the trees whispered with the wind. But it wasn't a whisper of fear anymore, nor one of confusion. It was a whisper of welcome, of understanding. The forest had been a place of mystery before, a place of shadows and uncertainties. But now it was different. Now it felt like an old friend, a familiar companion on her journey. She could feel the ancient energy in the air, the way the trees bent toward her, as if offering their silent guidance. The air grew cooler as she ventured deeper into the woods, but the chill didn't touch her. It was as though the elements themselves recognized the transformation that had taken place within her. The darkness no longer felt like a thing to be feared. It was part of the cycle, just as much a part of life as the light. She had embraced the darkness within herself, and now it was part of her peace. The balance between the two was no longer something she needed to control. It was something she had learned to live with, something that coexisted naturally as everything in this world seemed to. As she walked, the sounds of the forest became clearer, sharper. The rustling of leaves, the distant calls of animals hidden in the underbrush, the soft murmur of a nearby stream. She could feel the pulse of life all around her, and for the first time, she truly understood it. The creatures of the forest, the plants, the wind, everything was alive, not in the way we often think of life, but in a deeper, more universal sense. They were connected as she was now to the land, to the sky, to the elements, to the stars. And this connection was not something distant. It was immediate. It was here. It was now. Eventually, the trees began to thin, and the forest opened up to reveal a clearing. This was a different kind of clearing, not like the ones she had encountered before, but something more profound, more sacred. In the center of the clearing stood a large ancient tree, its trunk thick with age and wisdom, its branches reaching far and wide, as though embracing the sky itself. The tree's roots seemed to sink deep into the earth, grounding it to the land in a way that felt eternal. The air around it hummed with energy, as if the tree itself was a living conduit for the earth's life force. Laura felt an inexplicable pull toward the tree. She had encountered many sights on her journey, but this tree was different. It felt like a sacred place, a place where the very essence of the earth was present. She approached it slowly, reverently, as though she was standing before something ancient and wise. She could feel the energy vibrating through the ground, through her feet, and into her body. It was a deep, primal energy, one that resonated with her soul. When she reached the tree, she placed her hand on its rough bark. The moment she touched it, a surge of warmth ran through her. It wasn't just a physical warmth, but a warmth that seemed to fill her chest, a deep connection to something greater than herself. The tree seemed to pulse with life, as though it was breathing in time with her own heartbeat. She closed her eyes, letting the energy flow through her, and in that moment, she understood. The tree, in its silent, steady way, had witnessed the passage of time. It had weathered storms, felt the passing of seasons, and yet it stood firm, rooted in the earth. It was a symbol of endurance, of patience, of connection. And just as the tree was part of the world around it, so too was she part of the greater whole. She wasn't an isolated being, separated from the world. She was a thread in the fabric of life, a part of the same cycle, the same rhythm that flowed through every living thing. The tree's energy, its wisdom, seemed to speak to her without words. It wasn't a voice in her mind, but a deep knowing that settled into her heart. It was the knowledge that life in all its forms was part of something greater, something eternal. And as she stood there, her hand on the tree, she realized that her journey was not just a path to self-discovery. It was a journey of connection to the world, to the people she would meet, to the life that flowed through everything. It was a journey that would never truly end because it was part of the ongoing, ever-evolving dance of existence. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw something new. The clearing, the tree, the forest. It was all alive in a way that had been invisible before. The colors were more vibrant, the air more tangible. She could feel the presence of every leaf, every blade of grass, every living thing around her. It wasn't that the world had changed, it was that her perception of it had deepened. She was no longer looking at the world as something separate from herself. She was part of it as much as the trees, the sky, the earth, the animals. With a deep breath, she pulled her hand away from the tree, and the connection remained. It was like a thread stretching out from her heart, intertwining with the world around her. She knew that she would carry this feeling with her, wherever her journey took her next. Turning away from the tree, she looked back toward the path she had walked. It was no longer just a road to the unknown. It was a part of her story, a story that was constantly unfolding, constantly growing. And as she walked away from the clearing, she understood that every step she took was part of the same rhythm, the rhythm of life. It was a dance she was learning to move with, rather than against. A rhythm that was hers to follow, but also to shape. The wind picked up again, and for a brief moment it felt like the trees were whispering in unison, their voices harmonizing with the rustling leaves, the flowing streams, the distant calls of the animals. And in that harmony, Laura felt the pulse of the world, the connection between all things, and the quiet joy that came with understanding that she was part of it. The path ahead was uncertain. It always had been. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She knew she didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to know the destination. She just needed to walk step by step and listen to the world around her. And with each step, she would continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to connect. Laura continued down the path, her feet moving steadily across the earth beneath her. The journey had always been about more than just walking. It had been about discovering the rhythm of her own soul, finding the harmony between her inner self and the world around her. Each step, no matter how uncertain or unclear the destination was, part of the larger story of her life. A story written by choices, by moments of stillness, by bursts of insight, and by the quiet acceptance of things beyond her control. The world around her seemed to shift with each step, changing subtly. The trees grew taller, their bark richer in texture, the leaves more vibrant. The air grew warmer as the path led her toward an open valley. A gentle golden light spilled over the horizon, casting long shadows that danced like living things. The landscape before her was a breathtaking tapestry. Rolling hills, scattered with wildflowers, a stream meandering through the valley, winding toward the distant mountains. It felt like the world itself was welcoming her. The winds whispered through the trees, soft and sweet, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and fresh pine. She paused for a moment, closing her eyes to take it all in, to breathe in the deep, earthy scent that filled the air. There was something soothing about it, something grounding. It was as if the world was speaking to her without words, communicating through the sound of the wind, the rustle of the leaves, the gurgle of the stream as it flowed across smooth stones. She opened her eyes and continued walking. The valley before her was vast and open, stretching far beyond what she could see. It wasn't a place she had ever visited before, yet it felt familiar, as if she had been here many times in her dreams. The mountains that framed the valley seemed to watch over her, ancient and wise, their peaks shrouded in mist. The sense of being held in place by something much larger than herself filled her chest. She wasn't just a traveler passing through this world. She was part of it. She always had been. As she moved further into the valley, the path seemed to lead her toward a distant hill where a group of figures stood. They were just silhouettes against the fading light, but there was something about them that drew her in. They weren't waiting for her, not in any tangible sense, but their presence was felt. Their energy resonated with her in a way she couldn't fully describe. As she approached, she saw more clearly the figures, 4 of them standing side by side. They were tall and ethereal, dressed in robes that shimmered with a soft, silvery light. Their faces were obscured by the glow that surrounded them, but she could feel the power they held. These weren't ordinary figures. They were something else, something ancient. They were like guardians, protectors of the land sentinels of the world she had come to understand. The figures turned toward her, their gaze somehow penetrating though their eyes were hidden. It wasn't fear that she felt as their presence enveloped her, but a deep, resonating calm. They weren't there to judge her. They weren't there to offer guidance. They were simply there as part of the world, just as much as the trees, the mountains, and the wind. Without a word, one of them stepped forward. It was a woman, her silhouette tall and graceful, the soft glow around her pulsating like a heartbeat. She moved toward Laura with a sense of purpose, her presence as gentle as it was powerful. "You have come far." The woman's voice spoke softly but with a clarity that felt like a gentle breeze. "But the world is vast, and there is more for you to discover." Laura stood still, unsure of how to respond. She had walked through the depths of her own soul, had learned to understand her connection to the world. But this was different. This was beyond her understanding. The woman's words didn't feel like a challenge or a test. They were simply an invitation, a reminder that there was still so much more to learn. The journey never ends. The woman continued. "You will continue to walk, to grow, to connect. But each step you take, each choice you make, will ripple out into the world, just as the wind stirs the leaves. You are part of something greater, something eternal." Laura's heart fluttered with the weight of the words. She understood now more deeply than ever before that her journey was not just about her own discovery. It was about the world, about the connections between every living thing, about the shared experiences that bind them all together. She took a step forward, her voice steady as she responded, "What is it that I am meant to do next?" The woman smiled, her face still hidden in the glow, but her presence comforting nonetheless. "You have already begun. You have embraced the light and the dark within you, and now you must embrace the world outside. Your journey is not to seek the answers that lie ahead, but to live fully with awareness, with connection, to share what you have learned, and to learn from those who walk beside you." The woman turned, and the others followed their glowing forms, shimmering in the fading light. "The world is waiting," she said softly, "and so are you. The path is yours to walk, and in doing so, you will illuminate the world around you." The figures faded into the night, leaving Laura standing in the valley, her mind whirling with the weight of what she had just been told. The valley stretched before her, and the stars above seemed to shine even brighter now, as though the entire universe was aligned in support of her journey. The path ahead was hers to choose. There was no destination, no end. There were only steps, small steps, large steps, each one carrying her forward. And as she stood there, the quiet night settling around her, she knew that each step would be a step into a deeper understanding, not just of the world around her, but of herself. For the first time, she wasn't searching for answers. She was simply walking forward, embracing the unknown, embracing the endless possibilities of the journey. With each step, she would continue to discover. With each step, she would continue to connect, and that was enough. The silence of the valley settled around Laura like a warm, enveloping blanket. The energy of the land, the pull of the stars, the hum of the world, everything seemed to flow together, pulling her into a peaceful understanding. As the figures faded into the night, she was left with the quiet certainty that her path was now hers, to walk freely without fear or doubt. She was no longer searching for something outside of herself. The journey wasn't about finding an answer. It was about experiencing the unfolding, about becoming the person she was always meant to be. The stars above glimmered like tiny lanterns scattered across the vast expanse of the sky, each one a marker of a new possibility. With every breath she took, She felt the connection between her and everything else, the air, the earth beneath her feet, the stars above the creatures of the valley hidden in the night. They were all part of the same web, the same energy, the same flow of existence. Laura wasn't alone. She never had been. Her mind calmed the quiet hum of the world moving through her as she stood in the center of the valley, contemplating the vastness of what lay ahead. The figures who had spoken to her had reminded her of something essential, something she had already known deep inside, but hadn't fully understood until now. This journey, this life, wasn't about a destination, but about how she walked it. The path wasn't leading to some grand truth. It was a process of becoming more herself, becoming more connected to the world, to the people, to the unseen threads that wove them all together. And so she began to walk again. The path ahead was long, but it wasn't uncertain. She had come to understand that the world would always be full of unknowns. She couldn't see the entire road before her, nor could she predict where it would lead. But she no longer needed to. Each step she took now was an affirmation of her trust in the journey itself. The world was rich with possibility, and she had the courage to step into it even when the path seemed unclear. As she moved, the landscape before her shifted. The valley gave way to rolling hills, their soft slopes bathed in the light of the rising moon. The wind carried the scent of fresh pine and the faint fragrance of flowers, their petals glowing softly in the darkness. The land seemed to be alive, as if responding to her presence, guiding her forward. She walked, and the world responded. The trees seemed to bow gently in the wind, their leaves whispering their secrets. The hills seemed to welcome her, their undulating forms like waves in the ocean, moving with a slow, graceful rhythm. It was as if the earth was alive, breathing with her, reminding her that she was part of something much greater than herself. And yet she was not a mere passenger in this journey. She was a participant. Each step she took left a mark on the land, just as the land left its mark on her. She was creating her path with every decision, every movement, every breath. The energy of the world was not separate from her. It flowed through her just as she flowed through it. This was the understanding she had gained, the interconnectedness of all things, the way the world mirrored her own growth. As she walked, the sky above her deepened into shades of midnight blue. The stars were now bright and clear, their light casting long shadows across the land. For the first time in her life, Laura felt no fear in the darkness. It was not something to be afraid of, but something to embrace. The dark and the light were part of the same cycle, and in accepting both, she had found peace. In the distance, a light flickered. At first, it seemed distant, almost unreachable, but as she moved toward it, it grew brighter. She wasn't sure what it was, whether it was a campfire, a distant village, or something else entirely. But she felt drawn to it, the warmth of it pulling her forward. She walked toward the light, her pace steady and confident. As she drew closer, the light revealed itself to be a fire dancing softly in the night breeze. The flames were gentle, flickering, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. And around the fire sat a group of people. Figures shrouded in shadow, their faces hidden by the flickering light. They seemed to be waiting for her, their presence calm, unhurried. Without hesitation, Laura approached the fire, and as she did, the figures turned toward her. They were not strangers, though she had never met them before. Their faces were familiar in a way that she couldn't fully explain. They were like reflections of herself, pieces of the puzzle that had always been there waiting for her to find them. There was no surprise in their gaze, no sense of judgment. They simply looked at her, as though they had been expecting her arrival. The space around the fire felt sacred, as though it was a place where people came not to seek answers, but to share in the experience of simply being. As she stepped closer, one of the figures, a woman with long silver hair and wise eyes, stood up and gestured for her to sit. She did so without a word, drawn by the quiet calm that surrounded them. The fire crackled softly, sending sparks into the air. The stars above were a mirror of the fire below, 1,000 points of light scattered across the sky, connecting the heavens to the earth. The people around the fire didn't speak, but their presence was enough. It was as if they had come together not for conversation, but for shared understanding. Laura sat there quietly absorbing the warmth of the fire and the presence of the figures around her. She didn't need to ask questions. She didn't need to speak. There was something in the stillness, in the simplicity of the moment, that spoke volumes. The fire, the stars, the earth beneath them. It was all a reminder that life wasn't about the answers. It was about the experience, the journey of walking through it all, and the quiet understanding that came when one was fully present. After a time, the woman with silver hair spoke, her voice soft but full of wisdom. "You have learned much, Laura, but there is always more to learn, and as you walk, you will encounter others just as you are encountering us now. They too are part of your journey, part of the interconnectedness that binds us all." The fire crackled, and for a long moment, Laura simply sat there, taking in the words, the energy, and the quiet peace of the moment. The world, the path, the journey. It was all unfolding in its own time, its own rhythm. And she was a part of it. The woman's voice broke the silence again, gentle but firm. "Remember this, the path is always before you, but it is not about finding the end. It is about how you walk it, with presence, with connection, with an open heart." Laura nodded, feeling the truth of the words settle deep within her. She was no longer searching. She had found what she had needed to find, not an answer, but a way of being. And that was enough. The night grew deeper. The fire flickered low, and Laura knew that her journey was far from over. But for now, she was content to sit by the fire in the quiet understanding that the path ahead was hers to walk. With every step, she was walking into the light, into the unknown, and into the world that had always been waiting for her. The warmth of the fire continued to envelop Laura as she sat by the circle of figures. The quiet hum of the earth, the flickering of the flames, and the presence of the others around her all seemed to weave together into a single harmonious rhythm. It was a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the world itself. Each of the figures, each of their silences seemed to affirm something deep within her soul. The journey wasn't about finding a destination. It was about walking the path with awareness, embracing the unknown with open arms, and learning from every step. The woman with silver hair continued to look at her, her eyes filled with the wisdom of someone who had walked many paths, yet still found peace in simply sitting, simply being in the present moment. There was no urgency, no pressure to move forward or reach some grand goal. There was only the warmth of the fire, the soft glow of the stars, and the quiet understanding that they were all part of something larger, something infinite. As the night deepened, the others began to drift off one by one, their faces calm and peaceful, their presence gentle. Laura stayed by the fire, feeling no need to rush or to disturb the stillness that had settled around her. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the cool air on her skin, and as she did, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken, the reflection that had once terrified her, the uncertainty that had once clouded her mind. These had all become part of the landscape of her soul. She was no longer fighting against them. She had learned to embrace them, to accept that all parts of her, the light and the dark, had their place. They made her whole, and now she could see clearly that her path was one of integration, not separation. The journey had always been about accepting all that she was and walking forward with grace, not in pursuit of perfection, but in pursuit of presence. The fire before her dimmed slightly, the flames casting long shadows on the ground, but they didn't extinguish. They flickered softly, almost as though they were waiting for her to decide whether to stay in this moment of peaceful contemplation or continue her journey. For a long while, Laura simply sat, letting her mind wander through the vastness of the land that stretched before her. In the distance, the mountains loomed as silent sentinels, their peaks still wrapped in mist, but now they didn't seem so distant. They were a part of the landscape, a part of the world she was now connected to. The valley, the forest, the rivers and the hills, they were all woven into the same fabric, just as she was woven into them. Her gaze shifted upward to the stars, those eternal points of light scattered across the heavens. They seemed so far away, but in a way they were closer now. They were part of the same rhythm, the same connection that pulsed through the land beneath her feet, through the air that filled her lungs, through the heartbeat within her chest. The stars were not distant. They were part of the same symphony of existence that she had now come to understand. In that moment, Laura realized that the stars, the fire, the earth, the figures she had met, they weren't separate. They were all part of the same journey, the same unfolding. And so was she. She wasn't just walking through life. She was part of the rhythm that kept the world turning. She was a thread in a much larger tapestry, and everything, every moment, every connection, was part of the ongoing dance of existence. The wind stirred again this time with a soft melody, like a lullaby carried on the breeze. It wasn't just the wind, though. It was the world speaking to her again, reminding her that she was always moving, always growing. Her journey was not over. There was more to discover, more to learn, more to connect with. But for now, she was content. The warmth of the fire, the peaceful presence of the figures, the cool breeze, it all seemed to guide her, to reassure her that there was no need to rush. The journey was not about finding an end, but about continuing to walk with awareness, embracing each step, each moment, each connection. As the first light of dawn began to touch the sky, painting the world in soft shades of pink and gold, Laura stood up. She didn't know where the path ahead would take her, but she knew she was ready to continue. She had learned that the journey was not something to fear. It was something to embrace. With one last look at the fire which had now burned down to embers, Laura turned away from the clearing. The land was waking up around her, the birds beginning to sing their morning songs, the flowers opening in the light. Everything was moving, everything was alive, and she was a part of it all. The world was vast, and it was waiting for her. And this time she was ready to step into it one step at a time, with an open heart and a peaceful soul. The journey was not about the end. It was about the path, about living each moment with presence and allowing the world to unfold before her. The first light of dawn bathed the landscape in soft golden hues, and Laura could feel the warmth of the new day beginning to reach her, slowly wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the crisp morning air, and with each breath the world seemed to come alive even more, its vibrancy resonating through every fiber of her being. The birds in the trees began to stir their songs, rising in a symphony of harmony, and the gentle rustling of the leaves in the wind sounded like nature's own whisper. As she stepped away from the fire, she felt the energy of the night still lingering in the air, a quiet energy that calmed her heart and steadied her steps. The figures around the fire had disappeared into the shadows of the woods, but their presence remained with her like a secret understanding shared between the earth and the stars. She felt them within her part of her journey, part of her soul's unfolding. Laura walked forward, her path stretching before her like an unwritten story. The land was no longer just something she observed from afar. It was something she belonged to. She was a part of it, woven into its fabric as much as the rivers, the trees, and the mountains were. She could feel the pulse of life beneath her feet, the pulse of the earth itself calling her forward. And so she walked. The journey was never about rushing to a destination. She had learned that. It was about being present, being aware of each step of each moment, and allowing the rhythm of life to guide her. The destination would reveal itself in time, but for now, it was enough simply to walk to be a part of the flow of life. The valley was filled with new sights and sounds as Laura moved forward each step, taking her deeper into the vast unknown, yet nothing felt foreign to her anymore. The path was always clear, even if it was invisible to the eye. The wind, the trees, the distant mountains, they spoke to her in ways she could feel deep within her bones. There was a rhythm to everything, a constant ebb and flow that guided her forward. Eventually, the path led her to the edge of a forest where the trees opened up to reveal a wide, serene lake. The water glistened in the morning light, its surface like a mirror reflecting the sky above, interrupted only by the gentle ripples of the wind. The lake stretched out before her, vast and calm, as if holding the promise of something new. She stood there for a moment, taking in the quiet beauty of the scene before her. The stillness of the lake was profound, and it called to her, beckoning her to come closer. Without hesitation, Laura approached the water, stepping carefully toward the edge. She knelt beside the lake and reached out, letting her fingers brush the cool surface of the water. As she did, the world seemed to pause. The light from the sun shimmered on the lake, creating a dance of reflections, and for a moment she saw her own face mirrored in the water, not in the way she had seen it before, but in a way that was different. Calm, peaceful, connected. The reflection in the water wasn't just her face. It was her entire being, every step she had taken, every moment she had lived, every connection she had made. It was as if the lake held the story of her journey, not as a beginning or an end, but as a continuous flow. A story that was still being written with every breath she took. Laura smiled at the reflection, a sense of peace washing over her. She realized then that the reflection wasn't something to fear. It wasn't something that defined her in any one moment. It was simply the mirror of who she was in that instant, a reflection of her connection to the world around her. She had embraced all parts of herself, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, the uncertainty and the understanding. And in that acceptance, she had found peace. With a soft breath, she stood up and turned away from the water, the reflection fading behind her. She knew that this moment, like all moments, was just one step in the ongoing journey. There was no final destination. There was no place to arrive. There was only the path, ever changing, ever unfolding. The world before her seemed vast, but not overwhelming. It was full of possibility, full of life. And as she walked away from the lake, her heart felt full not with the need for answers, but with the openness to simply experience whatever came next. There was nothing to prove, nothing to seek. She was walking the path because it was hers to walk, and with each step, she was becoming more of who she was meant to be. The sun had risen higher now, casting its warm light over the land, and Laura could feel the embrace of the world around her, alive, vibrant, full of purpose. She wasn't separate from it. She was part of it, just as the sun, the trees, the birds, and the water were part of the same flow. And so with each step, she moved forward. Not in search of something to find, but in search of something to live, of experiences, of connections, of moments of stillness, and of the joy that came from simply being present in the world. The journey was her own, but it was also everyone's. She was not alone, nor had she ever been. She had always been connected to the world, to the people she would meet, to the places she would go. The journey never truly ended. It only unfolded with each new step. And so Laura walked no longer in search of something, but simply to be. As Laura continued her journey, the land around her seemed to respond, its vibrant colors becoming more pronounced, its sounds richer, deeper. Every step felt like a conversation with the earth itself. She wasn't just walking through the world. She was becoming one with it, moving through it, in a way she never thought possible. It was no longer a path to be followed, no longer a quest with an end. It was simply life unfolding, with each moment carrying her further into the vast, eternal dance of existence. The wind whispered through the trees, and the distant calls of birds echoed in the quiet expanse of the valley. But now Laura didn't just hear them, she felt them. It was as though her senses had expanded, her awareness had deepened. She could feel the subtle vibrations in the air, the heartbeat of the world itself resonating through her. The land around her wasn't just a physical space. It was a living, breathing entity, just as alive as she was. She walked through the valley, passing by the same wild flowers she had noticed earlier. But now they seemed to sing with the wind, their colors more vivid than before. The earth beneath her feet felt softer, as though the very soil was embracing her, offering her strength with every step. The quiet rustling of the leaves above seemed to carry a message, and Laura could almost hear it. You belong. For a long time, she had searched for answers in the outside world, trying to figure out where she fit, trying to make sense of her place in the vast expanse of the universe. But now, she understood. She had always belonged. Not because she had found a place to settle, but because she was part of the world itself. She was woven into the very fabric of life, connected to every living thing, every inch of land, every breath of wind. As she walked, the path began to climb, leading her toward the mountains that had always seemed so distant. She had already passed through so much, through the forest, the valley, the lake, and yet she knew her journey was far from over. There would always be new places to discover, new people to meet, and new lessons to learn. The mountains ahead called to her, their peaks still shrouded in mist, and she felt an undeniable pull to them. But this time, there was no fear of the climb. There was no anxiety about what lay ahead. The mountains weren't obstacles to overcome. They were simply the next part of the journey. And with every step, Laura felt herself becoming more attuned to the rhythm of the earth. Her breath slowed, her heartbeat steady. She wasn't in a rush. There was no race to finish. The path, the climb, the journey, they were all part of the same process, part of the same eternal unfolding. The forest thinned as she ascended the trees, becoming less dense, giving way to open meadows, their grasses swaying gently in the breeze. The air grew thinner as she climbed, the crispness of the mountain air sharp against her skin. The distant peaks of the mountains beckoned, but it wasn't the summit she sought. It was the experience, the journey, the transformation that took place with every step. The mountains were a symbol of something more, a reminder that the world was vast and she was part of it, no matter how far she went or how high she climbed. As she reached a plateau, the landscape unfolded before her. The valley below was now a distant memory, a mere outline of the path she had traveled. The vastness of the world stretched out around her, an endless sea of hills, valleys, rivers, and forests. The mountains, their peaks still veiled in mist, rose majestically before her, their sheer size humbling and awe-inspiring. And as she stood there looking out over the world she had come to know so intimately, she understood something profound. The journey was not about finding a place, a destination. It was about experiencing the world, about understanding that each moment, each step was part of the same grand unfolding. She wasn't lost. She wasn't searching. She was simply being a part of the earth, the wind, the sky. Part of the endless dance that had been unfolding since time began. She closed her eyes and let the wind wash over her. The soft, cool breeze carried with it the scent of pine and fresh snow from the peaks above. It was a reminder that the journey was never really about the destination. It was about the process, the transformation that happened as she walked, as she learned, as she connected. And for the first time, Laura understood that there was no final answer. There was no place to arrive. There was only the journey. A journey that was always unfolding, always moving, always growing. She opened her eyes and smiled, feeling the vastness of the world around her, feeling her own place in it. And for the first time in her life, she was not searching for anything. She had found peace, not in a place or an answer, but in the simple act of walking through the world of living each moment as it came. With a deep breath, she took another step forward. The mountains loomed ahead, but she wasn't afraid of them. She knew that whatever came next, she was ready. The path was hers to walk, and she would walk it with grace, with understanding, and with the knowledge that every step was a part of the beautiful, endless journey. As Laura continued her journey upward, the mountain path grew steeper, winding through rocky terrain and sparse patches of forest. The world around her seemed to grow more expansive, the views of the valley and distant peaks ever widening as she ascended. She was no longer concerned with reaching the top. It was the act of walking, of connecting with the world beneath her feet, that gave her purpose. Each step felt like a conversation, like a dialogue with the land. The rocks beneath her were firm, the soil soft where she tread, and the wind carried with it the whispered voices of the world, ancient, timeless, and full of stories. The higher she climbed, the more she felt her connection to the world deepening. It was no longer just the earth that she felt attuned to, but the sky above as well. The clouds moved lazily across the heavens, their edges tinged with the soft pinks and purples of the rising sun. As she reached another plateau, the view before her opened into a vast, sweeping landscape of peaks and valleys, a tapestry of nature's beauty unfolding before her. The mountains seemed to stretch on forever, their jagged tops reaching for the sky, their slopes covered in lush forests, and their valleys bathed in soft early morning light. And yet there was something more than the beauty of the landscape. There was a deeper sense of stillness, a presence that filled the space around her. It wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of understanding, of peace. The air around her seemed to hum with this quiet energy, as though the very mountain was breathing with her. She felt it in her bones, the way the land, the sky, and the wind were all connected like notes in a song, each contributing to the harmony of the world. Laura paused for a moment to take it all in. The cool mountain air filled her lungs, and as she looked out over the landscape, she realized how far she had come, not just physically, but spiritually. She had crossed valleys, climbed hills, and braved forests. She had faced herself, her fears, and her doubts. And now, standing here with the mountains spread out before her, she understood something profound. Every step had been a part of the unfolding. She hadn't been searching for something to fix or change. She had been discovering one step at a time who she truly was and where she truly belonged. Her gaze drifted to the peaks ahead, still shrouded in mist. The mountains were not an obstacle to overcome. They were a part of the journey, part of the landscape that would continue to shape her. She wasn't rushing anymore. She wasn't trying to reach the top to finish the journey. She was simply living it, experiencing it fully in each moment. The mountains, like all things, were not about conquering. They were about understanding their place in the world, their connection to everything else. She felt a stirring within her chest, a quiet joy that bubbled up, filling her heart. It wasn't the thrill of achievement, but the deep peace of knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had embraced the process, embraced the journey, and in doing so, she had found peace with herself and the world around her. There was no need to search for more. The world was already whole, and she was part of that whole. With a deep breath, she continued forward, her steps steady, her heart calm. The mountain path curved and wound, leading her toward a dense thicket of trees. As she moved forward, she saw that the trees here were different. Older gnarled, their bark twisted and weathered by the passing of time. The leaves shimmered in the soft light, their edges glowing faintly with a golden hue. The air grew cooler as she entered the forest, the shadows lengthening as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The trees parted ahead, revealing a small clearing, and in the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak tree, its trunk massive and covered in ivy. The tree seemed to exude an energy that was both grounding and uplifting, as if it had witnessed centuries of change and growth. Its branches reached high into the sky, and its roots seemed to disappear deep into the earth, creating a foundation that anchored the entire forest. Laura approached the tree, her heart beating steadily. There was something about this tree, something sacred, something familiar. She had encountered many trees on her journey, but none had felt like this one. This tree, with its deep roots and sprawling branches, felt like a symbol of everything she had come to understand: the balance between the earth and the sky, the light and the dark, the past and the present. It was a reminder that everything, no matter how small or how grand, had its place in the world. She reached out and placed her hand on the rough bark of the tree, and the moment her skin touched the surface, she felt a surge of energy flow through her like a quiet pulse that connected her to the earth itself. It wasn't an overwhelming force. It was gentle grounding, like the tree was sharing its ancient wisdom with her. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the moment, to feel the energy of the tree merge with her own. For a long while she stood there, breathing deeply, feeling the deep connection between herself and the tree. She wasn't asking for answers. She wasn't seeking something outside of herself. She was simply being simply present, accepting the wisdom the tree had to offer, understanding that the journey was never truly about reaching a destination. It was about living fully, embracing each moment, and learning from the world around her. When she finally opened her eyes, she felt different, not in a way that could be easily explained, but in a way that was felt deeply within her. The world seemed clearer, the air fresher, and she knew that she was ready to continue. The journey was still unfolding, but there was no hurry. The path was clear, and it was hers to walk step by step, with patience, with awareness, and with love. She smiled at the ancient oak, grateful for the reminder it had given her that the world was not something to be conquered, but something to be understood, to be loved, and to be part of. And with that understanding, she turned once again to the path ahead. The mountain loomed in the distance, but it was no longer just a place to reach. It was part of her journey, part of her story, and the story was still unfolding, and she was ready for whatever came next. The day grew older as Laura continued along the mountain trail, the sun casting long shadows that stretched across the rocky ground. The air had become cooler, the breeze picking up as she neared the higher reaches of the mountain. With every step, the landscape around her transformed, shifting from the dense forests and open meadows to a more rugged alpine terrain. The trees grew sparse, replaced by rocky outcrops and jagged ridges. Yet, despite the ruggedness, there was a strange beauty to it all. The world here felt raw, untamed, yet still so alive. The higher she climbed, the quieter the world seemed. The sounds of the valley below faded, replaced by the soft whisper of the wind, the distant rush of water tumbling down the mountain, and the occasional chirp of a bird soaring above. Each step felt purposeful, like she was walking through an ancient dream, each rock beneath her feet, each gust of wind speaking to her of timeless things. The mountain, though silent, seemed full of stories of those who had walked this way before her and those who would come after. The sense of solitude grew, not in a way that felt lonely, but in a way that was peaceful, sacred even. The mountain was vast, its expanse infinite, and yet it felt intimately familiar, as though she was being held by the earth itself. The connection between her and the land felt deeper than ever. She was not an observer, not a visitor. She was part of it, rooted in it, woven into it as much as the wind that moved through the trees, or the stones that had stood for centuries. Her thoughts, once scattered and uncertain, began to still. She no longer needed to question the journey to seek the answers that once eluded her. She had learned that the answers weren't outside of her. They were within, unfolding naturally with each breath, each step. There was a gentle knowing now, one that didn't need to be forced. She had arrived at a place of peace, not because she had reached an end, but because she had come to understand that the journey itself was the answer. The peak was now within reach, the summit rising up ahead, but it no longer seemed like a goal to attain. She wasn't climbing for the sake of conquering the mountain. She was climbing because the mountain called to her, because each step was part of the unfolding of her own story. And as she neared the summit, the sense of connection grew even stronger. She was no longer separate from the world. She was in it, and it was in her. When she finally reached the top, the view before her took her breath away. The land stretched out in every direction, a vast expanse of rolling hills, distant forests, winding rivers, and towering peaks. The sky above seemed endless, a canvas of deep blues and soft purples with wisps of clouds drifting lazily in the air. The wind here was stronger, more invigorating, as though it carried with it the breath of the earth itself, filling her lungs with its cool, crisp air. She stood there for a long while, taking it all in, the view. The sounds, the very essence of the world stretching out before her. It wasn't just a view. It was a feeling, a sensation of being part of something greater, something eternal. She was standing at the top of the world, but it didn't feel like an achievement. It felt like a moment of deep understanding, a quiet recognition that she was a part of all of this, just as the mountains, the rivers, the stars, the wind, the trees, all were part of her. They had always been. The connection had always existed, and now she was fully aware of it. She wasn't standing alone at the summit. She was standing with the world itself. A soft, steady wind swept across the peak, lifting her hair, and for the first time she felt truly still. The world moved around her, but she did not feel the need to rush or hurry. She had come here not to find something new, but to understand the depth of what had always been. The journey had never been about reaching the top of the mountain. It had been about the unfolding, the awareness of the journey itself, the experience of walking, of connecting, of living each moment with presence. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind carry away any remaining doubts or questions. There was no need for them anymore. The answers were all here in the quiet of the summit, in the stillness of the world around her. The journey was ongoing. Yes, but it was no longer a pursuit. It was simply a continuation of being. When she opened her eyes again, she knew that she was ready to descend, ready to move forward. The world awaited her, but there was no urgency. She was not leaving the summit behind. She was simply walking forward, carrying with her the peace she had found here. The mountain was no longer just a destination. It was part of the journey, just as every other place she had been. She would continue on, but this time not as someone seeking answers or striving for a goal. She would continue because the world itself was her guide, each step unfolding naturally with each moment, carrying her deeper into the rhythm of life. With a deep breath, she turned away from the peak and began her descent. The wind continued to move through the trees, the sun warmed her skin, and the path ahead stretched out before her. There was no destination to reach, no final end, only the continuation of the journey, the beautiful, endless journey of simply being. As Laura descended the mountain, the air around her shifted. The cool, crisp wind of the summit gradually softened, replaced by the warmer, more humid breeze that swept through the lower altitudes. The ground beneath her feet was softer now, the rocky terrain giving way to a carpet of thick grass and wildflowers. The world seemed to be alive in every direction, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the soft murmur of a nearby stream that she had not noticed earlier. Every step felt like an invitation to engage, to connect more deeply with the land, to be part of the world around her. The path was gentle now, winding through the rolling hills that stretched out below her. She didn't hurry, walking slowly, taking in the beauty of the valley. The distant peaks of the mountains, now far behind, were softened by the haze of the afternoon light. The journey that had once seemed filled with uncertainty and challenge now felt like a peaceful continuation of the path she had already walked, natural, inevitable, and full of possibility. For the first time, Laura noticed the smaller details, things she hadn't seen before. The way the light played across the edges of the trees, the intricate patterns formed by the leaves on the forest floor, the tiny insects that fluttered from one flower to the next. There was a quiet joy in these small, seemingly insignificant things, and in her heart, she realized that this was what the journey had always been, about the ability to find wonder in the smallest moments, to be fully present in the simple act of being. As she moved forward, she came across a small stream, its water flowing over smooth stones, creating a soft, soothing sound. She knelt beside it, her fingers skimming the surface of the water. The coolness of it felt refreshing, and as she watched the water dance and swirl around the stones, she felt something stir inside her. It was a quiet feeling, a deep grounding sensation that seemed to come from the heart of the earth itself. The stream represented something to her. It was not a path to follow, but a constant flow, unpredictable yet steady. The water was always moving, but it didn't hurry. It simply followed its course, accepting the twists and turns, the obstacles in its way, without resistance. She understood now that her own path had been like this stream, always flowing forward, shaped by her choices and the experiences she had, but never stopping, never stagnant. Even in moments of stillness, there was movement, there was change. And just as the stream carved its way through the land, She too had been carving her way through life. After a moment of stillness, she stood up and continued on her path. The trees around her grew thicker again, and the sounds of the world became quieter, more intimate. The distant murmur of the stream faded as she moved further into the woods, and now the only sound was the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet. She felt a deeper connection to the forest now, a sense of being part of its pulse, part of the natural world. It wasn't just the land that had changed her. It was the way she had learned to see the world, to engage with it in a way that was not about conquering or searching for answers, but about embracing what was about accepting the flow of life and moving with it. The path eventually led her to another clearing. This one was different, not as vast as the one she had found earlier by the fire, but just as beautiful. In the center of the clearing was a large, flat stone surrounded by moss and ferns. The sun filtered through the canopy above, casting gentle rays of light across the stone, illuminating it like a sacred altar. Laura approached the stone slowly, her heart calm and steady. She sat down on the stone, feeling its cool surface beneath her. The clearing was quiet, almost still, and for a moment she closed her eyes. The sounds of the forest, the wind through the trees, the rustling of leaves became like a soft song, a melody that resonated in the deepest parts of her being. She was at peace here, not because she had found the answers, but because she had learned to sit with the questions, to live with the uncertainty, to accept the ebb and flow of life. The sun was now lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. She could feel the day winding down the world, slowing, but it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a transition, a moment of pause before the next part of her journey. She knew that no matter where the path led, there would always be more to discover, more to experience. But the key was not in rushing to the next step. It was in being here, fully present, experiencing the world in all its beauty, all its complexity. She stood up from the stone, the coolness of it still lingering in her skin. As she gazed out at the surrounding woods, a sense of gratitude filled her heart. For everything she had learned, for every challenge, every triumph, every moment of stillness, she was thankful. The journey was not just about moving forward. It was about learning to appreciate the now, to embrace the unfolding. It was about living, not as an observer, but as an active participant in the world around her. With a deep breath, she began to walk again, her steps light, her heart steady. The trees parted ahead, and the path before her stretched onward, inviting her forward. There was no hurry, no pressure to reach the end. She knew now that she was walking not toward something specific, but simply walking through life one step at a time, embracing everything the world had to offer. The journey would never truly end, but that was okay. She wasn't seeking a destination. She was seeking connection to the earth, to the sky, to the people she would meet, to herself. And in that connection, she had found something even more precious than answers. She had found peace. And so Laura walked forward, her steps as steady as the rhythm of the earth beneath her feet, ready to meet whatever came next. As Laura walked deeper into the forest, the path seemed to open up before her, as if the trees themselves were gently guiding her forward. The air felt fresher, the scent of pine and damp earth, mixing with the sweetness of wildflowers that grew along the edges of the trail. With each step, she felt more attuned to the rhythms of the world, the flutter of wings as a bird flew overhead, the soft murmur of the wind through the branches, and the distant song of a stream winding through the woods. She wasn't in a hurry anymore. She didn't need to be. Her journey was not defined by destinations or milestones, but by the simple act of moving, of being present in each step, in each moment. Every sound, every scent, every touch of the breeze against her skin felt like an invitation to slow down to appreciate the beauty of the world unfolding around her. The forest seemed to welcome her, its embrace gentle and unwavering. She passed through pockets of sunlight that filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. The trees were tall and ancient, their bark rough and weathered, by time their branches twisting and reaching toward the sky in intricate patterns. The landscape felt timeless, as though it had been here long before she arrived and would remain long after she had passed through. As she walked, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. It seemed like a lifetime ago, when she had first set out, unsure of herself, unsure of where she was headed. Now every step felt like a continuation of that journey, but one that was full of clarity and peace. She had faced her fears, embraced her darkness, and learned to live with the uncertainty that had once overwhelmed her. And in doing so, she had discovered something beautiful, a deep, unshakable connection to the world, to the earth beneath her feet, and to herself. But this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. The journey, she realized, was ongoing. Life was never static, never fully defined by a single moment or destination. It was a constant, unfolding and eternal becoming, and she was a part of that rhythm. Every step forward was a new opportunity, a new moment to experience, to learn to connect. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, her chest expanding with the cool, fresh air. The forest seemed to hold its breath with her, the stillness stretching out into infinity. And then she smiled softly, understanding that this was the essence of the journey. It wasn't about rushing or striving. It was about being, about living fully in the present, about surrendering to the flow of life, and trusting that each step, each moment, was leading her exactly where she needed to be. As she continued down the path, the trees began to thin again, revealing a clearing up ahead. The sunlight was brighter here, casting a warm golden glow over the land. The air felt softer, as though the very world was exhaling a sigh of relief, inviting her into the heart of the clearing. She stepped into the open space, the tall grass swaying gently around her legs. And there, in the center of the clearing, she saw a small stone circle. It was unlike any stone circle she had encountered before. The stones were simple, weathered by time, but each one seemed to hold a quiet power, a quiet presence. They were arranged in a perfect circle, as though the earth itself had placed them here, as though they were markers of something deeper, something beyond the physical world. Laura approached the circle slowly, her footsteps muffled by the thick grass. She knelt down in the center of the stones, her fingers brushing the rough surface of one of the stones. It was cool to the touch, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. She closed her eyes, feeling the energy of the stones rise up through her fingers, as though they were alive, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beat of her own heart. In that moment, she felt the full weight of everything she had experienced, the reflection, the forest, the mountains, the valleys. Everything had led her here to this moment of stillness, of connection. The stones were silent, but they spoke to her in ways that words could never express. They were a reminder that she was a part of something larger, something ancient, something eternal. She was part of the land, part of the world, part of the flow of life itself. As she sat there, surrounded by the stones, she realized that her journey had always been about connection. Connection to the world, to herself, and to everything around her. She was never truly alone. She was always connected, always part of the rhythm of the earth, the rhythm of the universe. Every step, every choice, every experience had woven her into this vast, intricate web of existence. She smiled softly, a feeling of peace washing over her. She didn't need to search anymore. She didn't need to rush to some destination. She was already there. The journey was not about reaching the end. It was about living each moment with awareness, with presence, and with the understanding that she was already part of something beautiful, something eternal. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a soft glow over the stone circle, Laura stood up and turned toward the path ahead. The world was waiting for her, but this time, she was not in a rush. She wasn't searching for anything. She was simply walking, living, breathing, connected to the land, to the people, and to the universe. With each step, she was walking forward, but she knew that no matter where she went, she was already home. As the light of the setting sun bathed the landscape in a soft amber glow, Laura felt a deep sense of fulfillment settle within her. The world around her, the forest, the mountain, the stones, felt like a living, breathing entity that she was intricately connected to. Every sound, every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind carried with it a profound sense of peace. It was as though the very earth was speaking to her, not with words, but with a language older than time itself, a language she had learned to understand. The stone circle she had found was still in her mind, the energy of it resonating in her chest, echoing the deep rhythm of the earth. It was not just a simple arrangement of rocks. It was a sacred space, a place of alignment where everything past, present, and future converged. It reminded her that her journey, though long, had always been a part of something greater, a part of the unfolding of the universe. She turned and began to walk again, this time with no set direction in mind. The path ahead was undefined, but it didn't matter. She no longer needed to see the road ahead in its entirety. She was no longer chasing a destination, not running towards something or away from something. She was simply living. The world was vast, full of unknowns, but she had come to understand that the beauty was in the journey itself, in the quiet moments of connection, in the act of walking with intention and presence. The stars began to twinkle faintly above her as the sun disappeared below the horizon. The world was transitioning, moving from the warmth of day into the cool embrace of night. The moon, full and glowing, rose above the trees, casting a soft, silver light on the path in front of her. There was something magical about the way the world seemed to change so subtly as the hours passed. Each shift in the landscape, from the sunlit clearing to the soft, quiet night, felt like a reflection of the changes within her own soul. She was in a way like the landscape itself, constantly evolving, constantly growing, constantly unfolding into something new. As she walked deeper into the forest, the moonlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating the path ahead in silvery beams. The quiet of the night was filled with the sounds of crickets and distant owls. It was peaceful, almost sacred. The world felt sacred. She could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, a constant, steady rhythm that connected her to everything around her. It was the same rhythm that had carried her through her struggles, through her fears, through her uncertainties. And now it was guiding her, comforting her. Laura found herself in another clearing, the same kind of serene, open space she had encountered before. But this time, there was a new understanding in her heart. She didn't feel the need to rush. She didn't feel the need to move forward quickly. She simply stood there, taking in the quiet beauty of the night, the moonlight on the grass, the stars above her, the stillness that surrounded her. She was not seeking anything. She was being. And in that stillness, she felt the entire universe align with her in a way that was gentle, accepting, and profound. The path ahead remained uncertain, just as it always had been. But Laura no longer needed certainty. She had come to understand that the uncertainty was part of the beauty. It was in the not knowing that she had found peace. Every moment was a new opportunity for discovery, a new chance to learn from the world around her and from herself. She was walking through life not as a traveler on a quest to find something external, but as someone who was fully present, fully engaged in the unfolding of the present moment. And so, as the night deepened and the moon climbed higher, Laura sat down in the center of the clearing, allowing herself to rest. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, as though it too was aware of the quiet peace that filled the space. She could feel the earth beneath her, the roots of the trees reaching deep into the soil, grounding her, connecting her to the infinite cycle of life. She was part of this world, not separate from it, and this realization filled her with a quiet joy. The night stretched on the hours, passing like gentle waves, and Laura knew that no matter where the path led, she would walk it with grace, with presence, and with love. She had learned that the journey was not about rushing toward the next step, but about fully embracing each one, no matter how uncertain or unexpected it might be. The world was full of mysteries, full of wonder, and she was ready to explore it all, one moment at a time. And so as she sat there in the clearing beneath the stars, she felt complete. The journey had never been about finding something to fix or achieve. It had been about experiencing life in its entirety, its beauty, its challenges, its simplicity, its complexity. And now, in this moment, she understood that she didn't need to search for answers. She was part of the answer. She was part of the unfolding. With a deep breath, she stood up, ready to continue. The night was hers to explore, the world was hers to walk through, and the journey would continue, not with urgency, but with quiet intention. She didn't need to know what came next. She didn't need to understand it all. She only needed to walk, to live, to be. And so she did. The night stretched out before Laura like a blanket of infinite possibilities. The moon, now high above, bathed the forest in a soft silver glow, casting long shadows that danced across the ground, shifting with the gentle sway of the trees. The stillness of the night was both comforting and vast, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. But there was no rush in her steps. She wasn't looking for the next place to be the next step to take. She was simply walking through the night, listening, feeling, absorbing the world around her. The forest was alive in ways she had never fully understood before. It wasn't just a collection of trees and wildlife. It was a living, breathing entity, a reflection of the cycles of life, death, and rebirth that permeated everything. The leaves rustling in the wind, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot, the distant call of an owl. All of it spoke to her of the interconnectedness of life, of the deep, quiet dance that bound all things together. She was not separate from the world around her. She was a part of it. And in that realization, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The path she walked had no clear destination, but that was no longer a source of uncertainty. It felt right, like an ongoing flow of energy. She wasn't moving toward some future goal. She was living, breathing, experiencing now. The journey itself had become the answer. There was nothing to fix, nothing to prove, nothing to chase. All she needed to do was walk, to move through the world with awareness and presence, and in that, she found everything she needed. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the sounds of the night grew richer. The wind seemed to carry more than just air, it carried a message. The trees whispered to each other, their branches creaking as they shifted in the breeze. It was as though the entire forest was engaged in some quiet conversation, a dialogue she could only feel, not hear. And in that silence, she understood that the earth had always been speaking to her, waiting for her to listen. She had only needed to pause and be still, and the answers would come not in words, but in feelings, in sensations, in the subtle shifts of the world around her. The moonlight flickered through the branches, casting intricate patterns on the forest floor. She followed the path which seemed to lead her toward a small clearing where the trees parted to reveal an ancient moss-covered stone. It was large and weathered, standing in the middle of the clearing like an ancient sentinel. Laura approached the stone, feeling a deep sense of reverence wash over her. The stone had been here long before her, and it would remain long after she had passed. It had seen centuries come and go, cycles of life, and yet it stood steady and unmoving. It was a reminder that time in its infinite flow was something to be embraced, not feared. She placed her hand on the stone, feeling the cool surface against her skin. The moment her fingers touched the stone, a quiet energy seemed to pulse through it, reverberating softly up her arm. It was a gentle pulse, not forceful, but steady, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. She closed her eyes, letting the energy of the stone fill her, grounding her to the earth beneath her feet, connecting her to the land that had always held her. She was part of it, just as the stone was, just as the trees and the wind and the stars above were. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of unity. Everything, every breath, every step, every living thing was connected in a way that was impossible to explain with words. It was simply known. She was not alone, nor had she ever been. The path she walked was not hers alone. It was part of the greater journey of life, a journey that connected all things human and non-human, seen and unseen, past, present, and future. She had always been a part of this dance, and would continue to be for as long as she walked. Laura stepped away from the stone, her heart light, her steps steady. She no longer felt the need to rush or to seek. She didn't know where the path would take her next, but she knew it didn't matter. The journey was not about the destination. It was about the walk itself, the living, breathing moments that made up each day. The people she would meet, the places she would visit, the quiet moments of reflection. These were the things that made the journey worth it. As she moved deeper into the forest, the air began to cool even further, and the shadows grew longer as the night pressed on. Yet, despite the dark, she felt no fear. The forest was not a place of danger. It was a place of growth, of transformation. The dark was as much a part of life as the light, and she had learned to embrace both. There was no separation between them. Both were essential. Both were part of the dance. She paused to look up at the stars, their light piercing the night sky. They were ancient, those stars, their light having traveled millions of miles to reach her eyes. They had been shining long before she was born, and they would continue long after she was gone. And in that moment, Laura understood that her life, her journey, was part of something much larger. She was a star, too, burning brightly in the vast, infinite night. Her light was part of the same grand tapestry of existence, woven through time, through space, through the endless dance of creation. With a deep breath, Laura turned back to the path before her. There was no hurry, no rush to get anywhere. She would continue to walk step by step through the world she was so deeply connected to. She was not searching for something to find. She was living the journey, embracing the beauty of each moment, trusting that the road ahead would unfold in its own time. And whatever came next, she knew she would face it with an open heart, with a quiet mind, and with the deep understanding that the path itself was the greatest gift. As the hours stretched on, Laura walked beneath the canopy of trees, her steps unhurried, yet purposeful. The night was her companion now, the moon her steady guide. The forest, once dense and foreboding, now felt welcoming, its paths familiar, as though they too were in tune with her journey. There was no need for light to guide her. The stillness of the world, the whispers of the leaves, the rustling of the wind through the branches were more than enough. She moved forward, not out of a need to get somewhere, but out of a simple desire to be. The idea of a destination had faded long ago, replaced by the understanding that the journey, the act of walking, was its own reward. With each step, she became more attuned to the world around her, the way the wind felt on her face, the way the earth shifted beneath her feet, the way the stars shone brightly above each one, a tiny beacon of light in the vast expanse. The trees parted again, revealing another clearing, but this one felt different. It was not as open as the others. The air felt cooler here, and the shadows of the trees seemed deeper. Yet it was not an ominous feeling. It was simply a quiet stillness, as though the earth here was holding its breath, waiting for something. As she stepped into the clearing, she saw a single figure standing in the center. It was a man tall and still, his face obscured by the soft light of the moon. He didn't speak, but his presence was strong, as though he had been waiting for her. Laura's steps slowed, and her heart began to beat a little faster, but there was no fear in her. There was only curiosity and something deeper, a sense of recognition, as though she had known him all along. He did not move, but there was a quiet power in the air, an energy that seemed to radiate from him, connecting him to the earth beneath and the sky above. "You have walked far, Laura," the man's voice said softly, breaking the silence. It was calm, deep, and resonated in a way that felt like it was vibrating through her very bones. "And you have learned much." Laura did not respond immediately. She simply stood there, absorbing the energy of the moment. There was no need for words. The stillness between them was enough. "But there is more for you to discover." He continued, his gaze steady, his presence unwavering. "The journey is never truly complete. It is not a destination, but a continuing, unfolding a dance that never stops." She nodded slowly, the words settling into her heart with quiet understanding. She had learned that truth already, that life was an ongoing process, never static, never complete. It was not something to be rushed or completed, but something to live fully, moment by moment. There was no finish line, no end to the story. There was only the walk, the dance, the journey itself. "Where do I go from here?" she asked softly, the question coming more out of a desire to connect than to seek a specific answer. The man did not speak right away. Instead, he turned slightly and gestured to the world around them, the forest, the clearing, the night sky. "You have already begun, and you will continue. The path will change, as paths always do. But you have learned that it's not about knowing what comes next, but about being open to it." The words echoed in her mind, reminding her once again of the fluidity of her journey. She was not tied to a single path, a single outcome. She could go in any direction, and each choice would lead to new discoveries, new connections, new moments of understanding. "The world is vast," the man said as if reading her thoughts. "But so are you. Everything you need is within you already. Trust it, and you will know your way." Laura closed her eyes, letting the stillness of the moment fill her. She felt, as she always had, a quiet pulse of energy within her, something deep, something ancient, something that was always guiding her, always present. She had learned to trust it, to listen to it, and now she realized that inner voice would continue to be her guide. Opening her eyes, she felt no need for further questions. There was no longer any search for the right path, the right answer. The path would unfold, and she would walk it one step at a time, with awareness, with love, with presence. And as she moved forward, she would continue to find peace in the journey, knowing that it would always be enough. The man smiled softly, his figure becoming less distinct, fading into the shadows of the trees. His presence lingered, though, as if he were a part of the forest itself, a reminder of the guidance and wisdom that was always there if she was only willing to listen. Laura stood in the clearing for a while longer, feeling the energy of the earth beneath her, the stillness of the air, and the quiet of the night around her. She could feel the vastness of the world, but also her place within it. She was part of this intricate web of existence, and she was exactly where she needed to be. With a final glance at the empty space where the man had stood, she turned and continued down the path. The night was still young, the moon still high above, and the world was full of possibility. She didn't know where her steps would take her next, but she was no longer searching for an answer. She was simply walking, breathing, living, and embracing the journey, knowing that each moment was part of something greater. And with that understanding, she moved forward one step at a time into the unfolding path that awaited her.